find this will be helpful for our minutes.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. I'm Joe Williams, Director of Greenwich Library. With me today is Kate Soboleva. She's the Deputy Director of the library, as well as John Munt Jr. He is with Sterling Elevator Consulting, and he's helped us with this project.
I'm sorry, your name is John?
John, last name is Munt, M-U-N-D-T.
M-U-N-D-T?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And you're with Sterling?
Sterling Elevator Consultants, LLC.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Joe?
Sure. So the essentials of this, and you can see this in the in the submittals that we sent to you, that this was budgeted at 1.021 million. We got the bids in. The bids came in high. What was the delta on that? Let me see. Thank you. So our low bidder on this, it looks like it was 1,085,000 thereabouts. So with the delta and with contingency as well as with an adult that we want to put on, we're requesting 120,000 for this. Bear in mind that with this project, we are also receiving $400,000 from the state, and that's going to go directly to the town. And Roland informed me this lessens the borrowing for this project as well. So in order for us to move forward with the project, we would request an additional appropriation, interim appropriation of 120,000. So for any technical questions in the bidding, we do have John here as well as Kate who can answer whatever questions you may have.
So the grant, is that a grant that's a reimbursement grant, or is that a grant that you get up front?
I'm not sure. It's a reimbursement grant, and it would go to the town. So we've signed off, and we sent over for you to, as part of the record for this, you do have our contract with the state, which I've signed off on, and we're just waiting for the counter signature from the state.
Okay, super. Do I have any questions? Leslie?
Yeah. Did the scope for the project change at all? I know that there's always some confusion. You've got 3 elevators or maybe
No.
4 elevators, right? And, but this particular project was just relating to 3 of them, correct?
Right, that's correct. And it's still
two
for
of
the 3 elevators. The scope has not changed. What I think has happened is pricing, and I'll just pass it over to John that can talk about the pricing for elevators.
I recall, when we went through this last year, there was a discussion of 1, and then we decided it would be cost-effective to do 2. So refresh my memory as to why there's 3. I must have lost track of the
It's
third.
more like the groupings of them. So we have a single elevator, which we always say is the single elevator, and then we have our 2 main cabs. So when we refer to like one set or the other set, there's one set and then there's a single. So in this project, we would be doing the single elevator first, then followed by the 2 main cabs. So that's how it's always been. So there's three different elevators.
Roland, do you remember that? I agree with David. Can we pull out the sheet for that? I believe it was 2 elevators.
2 elevators, and the original request was for 1, and then we said, why don't we do the 2 together? And
Right.
so it's for 2 elevators, is what
Right,
the
no,
original
the
capital
first,
project was for.
yeah, the first year was the 1 elevator, then the second year was the 2 main cabs. And that's the pricing that we got, and that's what the budget was. And we had it down as a 2-year project, and then the BET, they unified the project into a 1-year project, which should have offered some cost savings to it, but it's always been 3 different elevators, meaning like 3 different shafts.
I don't believe that that's the way it was explained. Harry?
Yeah, I think all of our recollection is that it was 2 elevators. And the implication was it was the 2 main elevators. And I remember them being virtually equal in cost. If you're saying that it was the single elevator as one project and the pair as way it was
That was the
presented
way
to
it was
us.
phased out.
That's the way it was presented to us.
I don't think I got a water.
Okay, so we can kind of clear up confusion about, but on our part, it was always for us to do all of our elevators.
Roland, can we get a copy of the approval sheet for that?
I'll pull it up in a second. I'll have it.
Leslie's pulling it up, but in the meantime, I
Looked
think.
at it last night. Because there was also, in the you had funding for addressing an elevator, I think, previous to this capital request.
Through capital?
Because you've had problems with your elevators for several years. Clearly, you've been asking for it for several years.
Correct.
But, so we have the history problem, how we got here. Maybe the proposal here, which is to cover all three, the state of the elevators, they all require attention immediately, and maybe you can
Correct.
bring us up to speed on where we are
Correct, and that's why we
why
put
you're
in
here.
for all, that's why we put in for all three. Like, we've always had this down for, I think that the confusion about this may be because we've always had our one elevator that when you come in through our lower level, there's a one elevator there. And then we have our set of the two main cabs, which when you walk in on the first floor, they're the ones with the stainless steel insides. But we always had it broken out, like you would have year one for this, and then year two was gonna be the two main cabs. We never had it, we never had
And
said
this-
that we were doing two.
The CIP sheet, and again, it may be different than
Yeah.
a recollection of conversations, but it talks about the work that you had requested for the 1021, the sequence of works, modernizing one of the three elevators in year one, and then the remaining elevators in year two.
Yes.
Was the project description.
Correct.
And that says the library has three elevators, and so you're looking to address all three elevators. And then
Correct,
the
and that- it was
cost
a-
sheet, it was only 1 year of financing, so you would have to say the $1,021,000 was for all three.
Right, exactly, because of like year one, the way we originally had this structure was divided into two, like not like, because of the upfront costs on that. I think the second year, I forgot what we originally asked for that. But it was always to address all three, and that's where we came out with the million, when we got budgeted for $1,021,000 is for all three, and that's how we developed the budget for it.
It doesn't seem to be consistent with the sheet, though.
Well, but the way the sheet would work, their text would have remained showing, requesting funding for 2 years, but when we made the modification at the BET to consolidate the number, I would bet that just the dollar amount changed and none of the words above it changed. So now, the way the sheet's written, there is a disconnect.
Did you
But
go on the
I'll-
elevator tour?
I was not on the elevator tour.
But I was on the elevator tour, and David was too, and I only remember 2 elevators.
Right, so, well, that,
There's 3 elevators, I swear to God, there's
No
3
question about
elevators
three-
in the
no,
building.
we're talking about what the town approved.
The town
David.
approved for 3 elevators. That's been our understanding, and that's been the project description.
so we need to look at this, the original CIP.
Yeah,
But the other
wrong
thing
side.
is, this is turning into the whole premise, which I think I was very much in favor of. You came for the request of 1, and then we did the 2 because if we prevailed on the board, because there would be savings in doing the 2. So now we're winding up with 3 elevators and overruns. So-
Right, and that was our, yes, and that was what we were told at the time. But to talk, that's why John's with us today, can
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about the costs that have been associated with elevators.
And also, one point that may have introduced some confusion is the main passenger group, we call it, in the main lobby, the 2 side-by-side elevators. You have to do both of those at the same time because they're intercommunicating with each other. It's what we call a duplex group. So those 2 have to be done. You can't just do one and not the other. So that's maybe why that was considered one phase.
No, I think that actually we were well aware of that. That's why we did 2 elevators
Okay.
rather than just 1.
Okay.
So we're still trying to
but
explain
let's-
this.
No, we weren't. I disagree.
What?
I always thought those were separate elevators.
That's what I'm saying. But then we agreed to do 2 elevators.
Yeah, but not because we knew that they had to be done together.
No, not because we knew they had to
That's
be
what
done
your
together.
implication
But
was.
let's hear why they're the overruns, yeah.
We prepared our capital budget in 2023. We had first done our due diligence back in '20. We updated that. I make every attempt to provide real numbers based on what I'm seeing in the marketplace at a given time, and we based it on that. I think it's a cop-out to overinflate a number and then come in looking like a hero, so I tried to provide actual, accurate, market-based numbers, which were close. And then we've just run into, with the industry as a whole, supply chain issues, insurance increases. It's very erratic right now compared to where it was 5 years ago on pricing. And that's the key part of the differential. And I believe we're adding in a contingency, Joe? You wanted to
Yeah,
have that?
just when things
Just
open
a
up,
just-in-case cushion that would come right back to the town if that money wasn't used. And I'm not expecting any unforeseen conditions, but that's part of that number.
So I'm going to ask a question a different way. So if we were only doing the 2 elevators that we thought we were going to approve, how much would be, or that we thought we approved, how much would we be, what would the bids be for for the 2? And then, I'm sorry? I'm sorry, now I'm confused. I'm hearing different information. So let's just stop the meeting and read the, or not stop the meeting, but we're going to take a minute here and read.
The confusion is how we originally had it phased. Yeah. Right.
We're all misremembering.
But it says a sequence of work will entail modernizing one of the 3 elevators in year 1 and then the remaining elevators in year 2. Correct. So where are we?
Right, so.
Well, I mean, so remaining elevators in year 2. So what we approved was doing it in 1 year. That's what we did. So the request, as we discussed, originally came in to do it over 2 years, and then because of the expected savings in bidding it out as a single project, rather than to defer it and run into the, the supply chain issues that you're describing, we elected to do it in 1 year, but now we're faced with the higher cost. That's the situation. I stand corrected. I have to apologize because I thought it was 2 elevators, and I think they're clear. It's the 3.
Just to be clear, it was discussed as 2 elevators, but I think that we obviously did not hear it.
Right, exactly.
So there's clearly some confusion here. Since Ms. Pastelotis is over there doing some work, did you look at the approval process too for this, or just the CIP sheet?
I looked at the CIP sheet that came in the first selectman's book, and the text is exactly the same, but the dollar amounts are split over 2 years.
Right.
So clearly, the scope couldn't have changed very much for only 120,000, if you think about it that way, that the work that you had planned to do still matches the budget number that you were given, and it's just a new year with a new dollar amount. So I'd suggest that we continue to evaluate the 120 based on
Okay.
what they
Do
presented.
you have questions about the 120?
Well, were you finished with your description or not?
This is on. I just want to add a couple of key points. We had 2 bidders on a $1 million+ project. The 2 bidders were separated by $14,000. So clearly, both went after the project, both read the specifications and scoped the same way. I get nervous when there's huge bid spreads, that are wide, but this was razor thin. So I believe everybody understood the scope fully. And just adding to the savings potential, it's not so much the inflation from one year to the other. If you had to do two separate mobilizations versus one, you would have less competitive interest in two elevators versus three, and you would also have a markup when they would have to pull off the job, wait a year, come back to the job again. So there were other savings factors in there as well, besides just the annual inflation.
Now, at the risk of making more of a confusion here, when we originally approved this, was there the $400,000 grant? Was that in play, or is that?
No, that came after.
That came
No,
out.
come
that
after.
we didn't find out about that until after the approval of this
Yeah.
budget, and that was more than welcome by us, and that's been arranged that so that when this is done, I suppose the state would then transfer the funding over to the town, and that's for 400,000.
Right, so there's a net 280 to the good when you add it all up.
Correct.
Any more questions?
It could have been a net 400 to the good.
It could have.
Yep.
On the other hand, Harry, we're getting 3 elevators for the price of 2.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of an additional appropriation of $120,000 for the library elevator upgrades.
And Leslie
I would
Moriarty
say-
made a motion, routine or non-routine?
I would say routine.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that too.
Okay, Leslie Moriarty made a motion, seconded by David Weisbrod, to approve $120,000 as a routine obligation, appropriation, additional appropriation. Those in favor?
Can I make one comment on the?
Can I just call the, or do you want me to make,
Yes.
do you want to make your
Final call
comment
the
before I
vote.
call the
If
vote?
This is, call the vote.
Okay, so the vote on this is 400, which is unanimous.
Thank you.
And it's routine also. But, I think, to be honest, well, first Leslie, I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to make the comment, we don't have much turnaround time for the full BET, but typo on the front page, there's 120,000 doesn't have the comma, and it doesn't state where it's coming from. Now, I guess that's our next line item, so we have to fill in where the source of funding.
Right, and that's coming up very
Yes.
soon.
I know.
So, I think it appears so far that you do not need to come on Thursday, but you'll hear more from Mr. Fisher if you do, or from Berland. So we need a way to fund this. So we have FI4 from the Finance Department, $120,000, a bonding resolution, which is in your packet. Now, I'll make one comment on it, and that is that Roland has sent it to Robinson, Cole for review, but it's the bonding resolution that we'd normally use. And, certainly we have not received the final off from Robinson and Cole, but we expect it's going to be fine. Leslie?
So the question, since I think we do need to talk about these bonding resolutions going forward, is we're getting a few more questions from the RTM, and I want to make sure we've answered them appropriately. Since we now have the grant, which I know is a reimbursement grant, but $400,000, should we be bonding this 120, or do we not need to add to it? We can say it comes from the general fund, knowing that it would be then reimbursed upon grant proceeds.
The 1.1 million is already a
It's
bonded
bonded,
project.
right.
This is simply increasing the bonded project.
Correct, but we know now we have another revenue source, the grant.
However, we also know that despite the fact that it's a reimbursement, we know we're waiting on reimbursements for bridge projects, I believe, that Gabriella had told us recently since 2004. And for the school projects, at least probably 2008 at least, for construction reimbursement grants. So I'm very nervous about changing our policy. I think if you want to discuss this during the budget process, so that we all are prepared for that discussion. I think that would be worthwhile, but in the meantime, I will not support a change in the process that we've used for many years at this point in time. But I do think that it deserves discussion.
Can I follow up on my rationale here? Only because whenever we approve the financing and the bonding authorization, we are committing to potentially having the interest expense. So it gets confusing to the other town body that we're, seem to be encumbering, embracing a financing model here that will have interest expense. We're going to have income coming in. The town has the cash to cover it. I don't know whether this kind of grant typically gets paid quickly or if it's more like school construction, large ones that
Or
have
bridges.
the audit processes, which I think is what what holds it up. But it's a small amount of money also, and I know that our capital non-recurring, we have now brought that down to a level we are uncomfortable with reducing it further, but we do have the general fund if we choose not to and go forward on the bonding. And so I'm just putting that idea out there. I'd like to get the input or the opinions of a budget director and a controller, whether this is an issue that we should be addressing at this point.
I'd prefer to keep it the way we do, like the school construction projects, where we're just gonna bond $400,000 less than the full value of the project.
At the end of the day, we'll have the authority to bond for more, but we don't go out to the actual market. Clearly, that's what we do. We need to do it, and this is future work, is to do a good job of accounting for all of these grants, which, to make sure that we're not double counting in terms of over committing ourselves.
And I 100% agree with that. That's been the theme I've been running on now for years, so I'm glad you've joined the forces.
I have been saying it too, but okay.
So I can't even remember where we are.
Bonding
Did we have a
authorization.
motion? No, did we have a motion to,
I have a motion. Can I say the typos on this document too? In the title, there's no space between for and the. And the amount is incorrect. There's an extra zero in the amount. It's here, it's $1,200,000. Don't think that's what we want.
But just to be clear, we may approve the resolution, but we're not going to use it. Effectively, it's, right?
Correct.
so, and also Leslie's comments are very well taken, but we're also having it reviewed by bond counsel, and we didn't have their comments back, so,
Yeah,
whatever. What?
Maybe we don't need the resolution. Maybe Leslie's
No.
point is fair. It's not going to ever get used.
But we've not, that's changing our policy. I think that's something we can talk about during the, put it on the list of topics for the, budget discussions in February, and that's only a month and a half away. Harry?
Yeah, I would move approval of FL4, bonding resolution of $120,000, and just make a comment that the way we do things has been well explained to the Finance Committee and the Budget Overview Committee, so they're aware of how we do things.
As well as the rating agencies, may I add?
And the last one passed the RTM Monday night.
Great. So may I just make a correction?
Karen's got a question.
We're right in the middle of a motion first, and then you can talk. She would like it subject to review of the bond council?
Certainly.
But I would also call it FI.
I accept that.
FI rather than FL.
Oh, FI, sorry.
Okay, so.
So I move FI4 approval, subject to approval of bond council to move forward.
Okay, and
I'll second.
so moved by Harry Fisher, seconded by Leslie Moriarty. Those in favor? 4-0, and that's routine, Harry?
That should be routine also.
4-0-0, that motion has passed unanimously. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Next, we have,
Well, we could go back to schools.
you want to go back?
James is here.
I know, but, it may be quicker just to do health department. Do you think? why don't we just move on and do the schools afterwards? So next we have Caroline Baisley. She's been here patiently, so. So we have the Health Department, and we're asking everyone to introduce themselves, Caroline, and each, so that we have the accurate records for the,
Right. Caroline Baisley, Director of Health.
And I'm Matthew Angenito, Business Office Manager.
thank you very much. So we have two requests from the Health Department. HD3 Health is an approval to use $122,582.02, which is an acceptance of a public act funds.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Yes, $122,582.02. We are distributing these funds for the professional medical consultant that works with us in the HIV STD program. Also, some temporary salaries to support our part-time billing specialist, which bills out for insurance, all the insurances for not only our flu clinics, but also for family health patients that we see. Environmental aid, both of these positions are not new. Environmental aid is a position that we do hire someone to come in and do all of the public pools and collect all the beach samples for us during the season. And fringe benefits for both of those positions as well. Office Services Ability Network, that's a provider, third-party provider that we use when we do billing. Also, Verizon Wireless, that is for the Environmental Health Department division for handheld iPads. This is, we pay for the data packaging, and IT pays for the actual unit, the piece of machinery that we use in the field. There are 6 of those. Then the biggest item is supplies and equipment that we, that I convinced the state health department to approve for laboratory. There's a couple of pieces of machines in there. There's a QPR new piece of machinery that will enhance our tick testing program. We will now be able to not only look at 2 pathogens, but also 3 or 4, all the way up to 8 if necessary. And that's something that is an incredible thing for us to be doing, because there is a lot of tick-borne diseases at this point in time. About 10 or 15 years ago, there was only about 2. Now there's about at least 10. Also, pieces of equipment that we were in dire need to replace because of age and its functioning. There are analytical balances, there's lamps, there's a lead and air pump that we were using to actually analyze the lead and air down at our police department shooting range, and that piece of equipment is no longer up to date, and so that we need that at least twice a year to make sure that the police department is shooting not in excess of lead in the air for OSHA requirements. And then there's other pieces of machinery or equipment. There's thermometers, there's all kinds of stuff. Also, we have fluoride varnish that's in there for our dental program. We have toothbrushes that we do give away when we do when we do the not only the fluoride varnish application, but we also do those screenings. Our screening program is an opt-in, opt-out. We run about 87% in the elementary schools. That's about it.
Super. Does anyone have any questions on this, or?
No, I noticed it's the exact same amount as last year, which doesn't always happen, but,
yes.
And you're using it for similar
Yes,
things.
and we carried over quite a bit of money, but I felt very strongly that if they approved and they wanted to, they wanted me to use, you can imagine, they wanted me to use this money, and I want to use this money, and we have over $67,000 of the 122 that we are actually melting into equipment and supplies for the laboratory that will then bring this contribution, not the contribution on an annual basis, but the overflow that I'm carrying right now that I can't seem to get a handle on every year. And so I think that after this application, next year, we should be somewhat normal.
Do you have is there a limit on how long you have to spend the funds? No.
It's indefinite.
Okay. So I'll make a motion to recommend approval of acceptance or appropriation of the public act funds for the Health Department of $122,582.02, and it be routine.
Second that.
Motion made by Leslie Moriarty, seconded by Harry Fisher. Routine application for $122,582.02. Those in favor? Okay, so that motion has passed unanimously 4-0-0, Carol. So that's good news. And the next we have HD4, which is for the Health Department. It's $19,371.25. And this is a transfer to move funds to support grant-funded benefits and salaries.
Yes, this application, it's the same code where we have the Public Act funding in. And this, we have chose during this application, again, to support not only salaries, but as you can see, a little bit of our WGCH public service announcement to redesign that grant in order for us to use this money more efficiently and effectively. And so we have a couple of transfers of monies from accounts like 215 or the 200s into, the 130 and the 750, which is the Social Security, and of course our 224, which is our media account, which will then go to WGCH public announcements. So,
Great, thank you.
I move we
Harry,
add, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, did you have a question?
No, I was going to make a motion.
Okay. So does anyone else have it? Okay, no questions. Harry. Harry.
That we
David.
approve HD4 for the transfer.
Your mic's not on.
I move that we approve HD4 for the transfer of funds.
I'll second that and suggest routine.
To move by David Weisbrod, seconded by Harry Fisher, as routine, the transfer for $19,371.25. Those in favor? 4-0-0. That motion has passed unanimously, and both are routine. So
thank you.
I guess we can say enjoy the rest of your holiday season.
Yes, you too. Thank you.
And of course, they will be going before the BET on Thursday evening, but you can watch on TV. Okay, so now we're going to go back to ED1, the Board of Education, for $1,965,000 for an additional appropriation for the Old Greenwich School. And so we have with us today James Waters, but James, we were asking everyone to introduce themselves and their team so that we have all the accurate information for our minutes.
Wonderful, more than happy to do that. And apologies, we were late. I didn't
No,
see
it's
the
a
change, the 30-minute change. So, my name is James Waters. I'm the chairman of the Old Greenwich School Building Committee.
Thank you.
Jeff Anderson, Vice President of Pre-Construction for Downs. We're the construction manager for the Old Greenwich School.
Ryan Patrick with Downs Construction, estimating manager.
Thank you very much. Okay, so my first question is, we had the good work of Samantha preparing your blue sheet for today. Has this blue sheet been reviewed by the Board of Education and signed off by them?
I believe it has.
We haven't, do we have anything? We don't have any kind of input to that. So far, Samantha doing A1 work.
Yeah, well, it's pretty good, and I think we gave her some good supporting information. I know Ben Branyan had some dialogue with him. He said that Dr. Jones, it was in her inbox for a wedding signature, so
Okay, so
that was yesterday.
okay, so we haven't heard from the BOE on this. And we noticed that Mr. Watson, no one's here from the BOE, right?
Building committee
I-
project.
Looking around, it looks,
It's a building,
looks correct.
it's a building committee project.
More to hear, more to talk about that one. Okay, so you're here for an additional $1,965,000, and we have the package, which seems to be jointly Morganti and Downs, right? Or what
which
James sent
package?
us.
Oh,
Yes.
that's got all, that's prepared by the building committee,
Okay.
but we do include the logos of our full team, which is on the cover, so.
Okay. Thank you. So, do you want to proceed?
Great. So, good afternoon, and thank you for having us. One thing I did want to flag, I think several of you, or most of you, if not all of you, are aware, the Board of Ed voted to approve this interim appropriation on November 21st, which is captured in their minutes that I believe they approved last night. So, I do want to share a couple material updates. I did have the opportunity to discuss this with you, with each of you in advance of this meeting, but we do have some late-breaking updates, which I think are positive news. So on this past Friday, we received bids on long lead electrical items to include the generator and switchgear for the project. The bids came in right where we expected. So Downs will be doing a scope review and with the lowest bidder, and intends to submit a guaranteed maximum price to the building committee sometime next week, at which point these items will be ordered. That update we got this morning at our building committee meeting at 7 a.m. Second is that this morning, the building committee approved the 100% construction documents, including the plans and specifications for the project. This includes the CD estimate that we provided for this meeting. The design for the project is fully complete. And as in the materials that we provided for this meeting, we have spent about $1.46 million of A&E funds to date. We have a little bit left to go in the pre-construction process, but other than that, the construction documents are complete. The Board of Ed will be considering that that same motion regarding the plans and specifications at their meeting on Thursday. I do want to share a couple and point out a couple items on the upcoming timeline. The Board of Ed, as I said, will be considering the 100% CDs at their meeting Thursday. Next Thursday, the 19th, we're going to meet with the state for our plan completion review meeting. We are aiming to complete the PCR process with the state by the end of January, so the project can be taken out to bid in February. I do have copies of the schedule here. If any of you would like to see that, I'm happy to provide those and submit them for the record.
So why don't you give those to Roland, and then Roland, I mean, you don't have to do it right now, but Roland will just make sure it gets out to all the BET members.
Wonderful. And then finally, so with the project being taken out to bid in February, we do expect to receive a GMP from Downs in early April, and then begin to mobilize contractors so we can begin construction. Couple other updates, points for you. The construction phasing plan for this project is quite complex, but it is complete. It was completed this fall. It has been briefed to the community. We had 3 forums on October 16th that had pretty strong attendance. The feedback has been quite positive. One thing I do want to point out is that the phasing is critical, both in terms of keeping the project on time and on budget, and in terms of keeping everybody safe throughout the project. I do want to flag also that this project has received very strong support across town government over the past 2 years. That includes unanimous support from P&Z, the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Ed, and the RTM. I think you guys watched some of those meetings, so I think you're aware of that. Okay, on this interim appropriation in specific that's before you, this is about two things. First, the interim's about ensuring that the town has an appropriate owner contingency as we go through the project. We are asking for 7% of construction costs. This is based on the overall nature of the project and the extensive diligence that we've done on the building. The building committee has spent nearly $350,000 of the taxpayer dollars on diligence to make sure that we develop a more clear understanding of existing conditions. As with any renovation, there are definitely going to be some unknowns going forward, which is why we're asking for 7%. But we strongly believe that the diligence we've conducted has helped mitigate a lot of the risks going forward, or else we would be asking for an owner contingency of 10% or more. Second, this interim is about keeping the project on schedule. As I said before, we have a tight window to get through the state, get through bidding, consider the GMP, and start construction on time this summer. I can't emphasize it enough. We need to start the project on time, or we risk the approval from the state, future delays in the phasing plan, which have the potential to cascade, and risk the approval that we already have with the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights to bring the school into compliance with the 2010 ADA standards. They are expecting us to start this summer. We have found a way to pay for everything in the estimate except for the owner contingency, which was underfunded and which we had discussed with the BET back in March and have discussed multiple times with the RTM. For the record, I'm the chairman of the RTM Budget Overview Committee, and the RTM Budget Overview Committee is eager and expecting to receive this interim appropriation when it's ready. I also, everybody that I think on this board has known for months that this interim appropriation is coming, and we're here exactly when we were asked to come, once the CD estimate was complete. I do want to make clear to this board, and Downs is happy to provide some color on this. This interim appropriation will have zero impact on bidding. This project is going to be broken up into 20-plus bidding packages, just like the smaller electrical one that we just did last month, just reported back to you, and it will be farmed out to dozens of subcontractors. There is no chance one subcontractor is going to say, oh, they just approved a 1.9 interim to increase the owner contingency, so let's inflate our bid to take a bigger piece of that. These bidders are going to want to put together the most competitive bid package possible, at least if they want to win the bid. This board knows we're required to go with the lowest qualified bidder, as is the case with all of our public construction projects. And the building committee has been extremely diligent on cost management, and we're going to continue to do so going forward. So finally, the GMP that Downs will submit to us in April after receiving bids is about hard construction costs. Soft costs and owner contingency are outside the GMP. And look, in conclusion, I would just say, making sure the town has an appropriate owner contingency has everything to do with keeping the project on time and ensuring the town is adequately protected. My concern is that if we do not receive this interim appropriation, which we've known about for 9 months that it's coming, it threatens the timeline for the project. I think everybody also is aware that this building committee has done a very thorough job of dotting I's and crossing T's along the way. If we have to wait until April after we receive the GMP to seek an interim appropriation just to make sure we have an adequate owner contingency, that will mean we're focused on starting construction and making sure we're doing so in such a way to keep people safe and protect the learning environment. And we'll be doing it at the same time as we're chasing funding. So, and then the other point I would flag is that the RTM, if we have to wait until April, if the RTM will not be able to consider this until June. The call deadline for that is May 16th. So that will be after the project has started. So to me, I would just flag that I don't believe it's prudent to wait until after the project is started to make sure that we have an owner contingency, the appropriate owner contingency. We should want to have a solid one in place, and we should not set a bad precedent for moving forward on projects without that contingency in place. With that, I'm happy for questions, or I'm happy for if Downs, if you'd like to hear a little bit more from Downs.
Do you have any questions? No questions, sorry? Leslie?
I guess I want to make sure that I understood the information that you presented about the impact on the schedule if this appropriation does not move forward today or this week by the BET. In the written material, you indicate that you don't believe the state will approve the project with the current contingency. Am I understanding that correctly?
We think that is, look, I can't speak for what the state's going to do, right? But what we do know is that what our team has told us, that they believe that state is very likely to flag that they don't believe we have enough owner contingency in the project, which could risk their approval.
It could risk their approval. You don't know if that's going to happen, and you don't know, you can't even look back at other projects. Every project is different to know what they will do. But have you had, and I'll look to your consultants' experiences with the state, with these conversations?
Sure, Jeff Anderson again with Downs. So our recommendation is certainly that the building committee and the town of Greenwich go into the PCR meeting with an understanding that they have what would be considered an industry standard contingency for the soft cost side of the work. It has been my experience that this is a topic in that PCR meeting with the representatives from the state of Connecticut. I have not been involved with a job where a job was stopped or rejected or asked to not move any further until that was put in place, but it will certainly be a topic of discussion on an occupied phased renovation that as an owner, you are carrying a proper contingency to handle unforeseen conditions.
Do you need the funding to enter into the contracts to start construction?
Not for owner contingency, right?
No, for us, we're dealing with two things, as James mentioned in part. We have construction hard costs, which are our eventual GMP, which represents approximately 40 million of the total $45 million ask. So we're working towards that number during the bid process that James outlined, the eventual scope review, and then the subsequent issuance of a guaranteed maximum price. Once that GMP is established is when you need to have, or we would recommend that you have the proper contingencies in place to be able to begin to handle potential unforeseen conditions that may come up during construction.
And again, I'm kind of thinking through the material here and the alternatives, right, as people certainly don't want to tie up funds that aren't necessarily needed. But I think that we've all seen the outcome of building committee projects that we start that are underfunded. And it makes it difficult for a building committee to know what resources it's going to have to complete the work. And it makes it tough for planning and causes some short-term decision-making. On the other hand, there was certainly a lot of deliberation over the funding for this project and the amount of funds it would take to get here. So I get that there may be some views on this one way or the other. I'm supportive of funding a building committee with the resources that it needs. The scope of work hasn't changed. You've done a lot of work to identify what is going on behind the walls in this, in the structure, to try to minimize surprises and minimize, big changes in that construction number. You've not come to us with a change in the construction number. But you are concerned that you don't have the resources you need to support the project on the soft costs.
Look, I think where I'm coming at from this is a couple things. One is that when we started this project, your former colleague, Mike Mason, was very clear with me at the start when I was going around talking to guys like him and Steve Walco and people who'd led building committees in this town. The one thing that Mike and others were very clear on is you must make sure you have an appropriate contingency for the project, right? And I think they were referring primarily to the experience with Hamilton Avenue, which obviously where we had a different contract structure than what we have now, and it was viewed as the standard in the town. But I'm also looking at all of the contingency funds in the project. We have scrubbed every number in depth with the help of, our entire building committee, who've really just done a bang-up job on making sure we try and get this right. And right now, as I've outlined in the materials, our view is that what we need to have in total for the project is a 3% contingency for the construction manager, which is required in our contract, and a 7% owner contingency for a total of 10%. Is that the perfect number? We've tried to get it as dialed in as precisely as we can. And I think after, weeks and months of deliberation on that was sort of where everybody's head went.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. You reference on page 5 an 8.296 state reimbursement.
Yeah.
How has that evolved? Is that the same number that we've seen, or has it gone up, and what are the?
So Ryan can speak to, I'll give a first stab and then I'll give it to Ryan, but that number is up from the design development estimate. It's about $1 million higher. And the main driver of that is that you have in the design development estimate, which we provided to you in March, it had a higher design and estimating contingency, and which is higher above line item. As I've kind of briefed you guys, we don't believe that's actually pure contingency. It's likely one of those things that will become hard cost. But that number has come down as the designs have progressed from the 50% level where we were in March to the 100% level where we are today.
So at the stage of the DD estimate, we carry that contingency, which is deemed ineligible until spent on an eligible cost. And so now that we've reduced the D&E contingency, that's why you see that change. They've been allocated towards items that are eligible, hence the increase in the reimbursement.
Right. And one other question, just to make sure we all get it and it's clear. The difference between the owner contingency, which is the request that's before us, and the construction management contingency, if you could articulate it. The way I read this, the construction management contingency is $1,187,000 plus the bid and D&E contingency of $988,000, not to mention escalation contingencies, if you will.
Yep.
And how those numbers, which are separate and apart from the owner contingency, how that really plays into the bidding process and the project overall.
I'm going to let Downs speak to the different components of contingency. But one thing I do want to flag at the start is that, look, I think from the building committee's perspective, we've been working as a real team, right? Everybody working together. Downs has been a critical part of that team in getting our estimating done right, in helping us oversee some of the diligence. But we've all been working as a collective team to get to this point. At some point, right, when we start construction, assuming we accept the GMP that comes in, look, Downs is going to have a pot of contingency, and the town is going to have a pot, right? And there's going to be a sort of, we're not necessarily going to always be on the same side of the table, right? We go into that eyes wide open, and I think our view is that we want to make sure that the town has adequate protection for things like change order as these things are worked through over the course of construction.
So as I mentioned earlier, as your construction manager, we're working towards compiling GMP guaranteed maximum price. That is the construction hard cost value, or approximately $40 million of the total $47 million. I think I said 45 by accident earlier. 47 total with this new appropriation. So after we go through the bidding process, we go through the scope review process, and we begin to summarize actual bids, commitments to the scope of work that's outlined on these completed construction documents, we will be including in that guaranteed maximum price a 3% construction contingency. That construction contingency inside of our GMP is used to manage what we call in-scope changes during construction, things that we would be reasonably responsible for as interpreted from those complete 100% construction documents. Now, conversely, on the soft cost side, as we're recommending here today, the 7% total owner's contingency are for unforeseen conditions that may come up during the construction process that would be the responsibility of the town of Greenwich. So for instance, if we open up a wall and we find some structural issue that we did not know about, the cost to repair that structural issue would be an owner cost and therefore come from that owner's contingency. So they're completely separate in the process until such time that unforeseen condition comes up, and then prices and quotes are put together. They're vetted between the entire team, including us, and presented to the building committee for approval.
Last thing I would just point out on this is, this has been part of the challenge that we've really spent a lot of time trying to get right, is documenting existing conditions. Our owner's rep from Morganti, he talks all the time about documenting existing conditions, has been very forceful in pushing our architect to make sure that we do that. And thankfully, on behalf of the town, we have someone like Jackie Welsh, who's sitting here in the room with us too, and literally is going page by page through the 100% documents and making sure every I is dot, every number is correct. And we've been trying to do everything that we can to avoid these out of scope changes.
Yes.
You opened up a question. Is it all right if I ask this of Jackie?
If you ask her and she has to reply, could you just ask her to come to the table?
Yeah,
So-
would you mind coming
Oh,
to the table?
speaker.
Thank you. I'm very interested in this difference between the owner's contingency and the construction manager contingency, and to the extent, is a question, if it's the case that the architectural drawings are very detailed, very thorough, very detailed, and if it's the case that we do a lot of testing and hammering around the walls in advance, is it fair to say that that will reduce the likelihood of change orders that would come out of the owner's contingency? Do I understand that right?
It's on? Okay. Yes, so hopefully that is the case.
Right.
And that's why we spent that money to do that. So, but still, you don't have a crystal ball. There could be something comes up. We feel we have a really good knowledge of the building, better than I would have ever expected. And again, to give kudos to our owner's rep, and thank you for the people that lobbied to have owner's reps on our projects. That's made a huge difference. So yes, I think that there will be terse discussions, hopefully friendly, about what the change orders are, but the building committee will challenge anything that we think should not be paid for by the town. And as I said in my interview, I watch every penny.
Right. And the last question, maybe both for you and for the Downs people. Compared to other projects that you've seen, you're both very experienced in this, how good a job have we done in terms of the detail in the specs and the architectural specs and the probing that we're doing in advance, both of which I think would be good steps to take to reduce the likelihood of the owners.
can I
Have we
answer
done a
first?
good job on that?
So I'm really impressed by the amount of diligence we've done at each phase, and having the format, which was from lessons learned from Hamilton Avenue, which was not to go with the GC format, but to go with a construction manager, and to do that at risk, which also came out of other projects that these couple of people on the committee have been on, to not take an advisor. We went at risk so that we could involve the construction managers so that they have some skin in the game, so to speak, and that at every step, when we accepted drawings and the building committee voted on those drawings to accept them, we went through the building committee, myself and a couple of other people that can read the drawings, and certainly people reading the specifications, and other people that are on the town committees have all contributed to reviewing the schematic design. Not only that, our owner's rep, which is a construction company, pulled together their team to look at those drawings and make a list, and Downs also went through. And they compiled a Google RFI list. So we have that tracked for each one of the stages. So schematic, DD, and the 95% construction drawings were all vetted by 3 sets of eyes or more. And also the same with the cost estimates. We not only took the one cost estimate, but we went as far as the building committee voted to increase the number of people vetting the cost estimates, to hire a firm out of Boston to be an independent cost estimator, and that members of the building committee, James and I, sat through a full day of reconciliation, not to say we don't trust you guys, but to make sure that they weren't saying, okay, we'll just agree with your numbers, to hear the difference. And, you know, you get a summary of what we've looked at, but we have huge amounts of detail on unit costs and things like that. So I feel that this has been a very good process, and so hopefully. Do you want to add to that?
I would just add that forensic investigations, as we call them, of existing buildings such as this are the hallmark of any successful renovation project. And I would say that what we've done here with the support of the building committee is what should be done, and what we go into any project and ask for to mitigate the long-term risk of unforeseen conditions.
One thing I'd like to say is that although Downs was there to open up the ceilings and the architect did the inspections, I would also say that, you know, I would hold Downs accountable for some of the viewing of the behind the walls and in the ceilings, and I'm sure they'd agree.
Good for you.
That's it for me.
Harry, do you have any questions? No questions at all. So, you know, as Jackie knows, Leslie too, I feel very strongly about contingencies and having an adequate contingency before construction starts. However, I wonder if it's premature for us to be really looking at these numbers until the bids come in. And when you have what is presented to us as 95% construction documents, but now you say you have 100, did you reprice those, the contract when you went to 100, which I guess was yesterday, or Friday, whenever it was? And did your numbers come up to be similar to what you're presenting here for just the construction part of it? The new construction is 6.2, the renovation at 26.7, et cetera. Were these numbers the same, or are there variances between what you're presenting to us as 95% and the 100%, which I know you've just had for the last, whatever, couple days or day?
So when you do this pre-construction process, you don't do a fourth round of estimates. That's baked in. The standard is 3, so the third is at the 95% level, and the last 5% is just incorporating the value engineering decisions during that budget reconciliation process. And I'll just remind you that the project does have that D&E contingents, design and estimating contingency to try and cover any potential changes. The escalation number that's included there is the escalation from here until the project is kind of taken out to bid, so we have a little bit of buffer, but there will not be a fourth estimate for the project.
So, I'm sorry,
I have to give you a little more information.
this is fine.
Mike.
That was fine.
So when we did our review of the 95% and this RFI list that we did our diligence on, that was looking at 95% and saying, let's bring it to 100. And so the architects then incorporated our RFI, request for information, our comments on the drawing saying this is missing, or this isn't complete, or what we want. And we worked with Downs and through Ryan specifically on adjusting numbers so that he has that kind of in his mind. We asked, for example, for the deep, we decided that it's best to change the floor elevation 11 inches in order for their approval. It wasn't going to affect our design. We know his numbers, so we feel really comfortable that that small amount of contingency that's left that we kept for the bid contingency will cover that 5%. We feel very sure that we have a full handle on all aspects of the changes, right, Ryan? You have full confidence?
So again, thank you, Jackie. As I just looked at it at this point, before we've got the construction bids in, we're basically, I'm going to add escalation to the contingency, so that's 6.2, plus the construction contingency, a 3.0, plus the 2% owner's contingency. So it's really about 11.2% now. And again, not that I encourage you to come back when the construction bids are in. I think that is probably a more realistic time to look at these numbers, given that you can talk to the state and say, basically, look, when you look at all of this, there's 11.2% here. We're now talking about a project that's at $47.1 million for a renovation. And there were many on this board that felt if, and as James, if this project went over 35, it really should be a new construction project versus there were many people who felt that way. But again, as I look at this, I would prefer to, have a look once the construction bids come in and then make sure there's really an adequate, contingency, because this is a renovation project. It is not, a small amount is new construction. Well, it's more than small, but it's but a lot of it is renovation of a very old building where the windows aren't being redone, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my thoughts on that. I'd also like to talk to you a little bit about, what you've deducted from our numbers here. And, Roland and I worked on this and we just really didn't understand this. You have quote, funding offsets. Those are town appropriations given to the Board of Education. They aren't building committee. We have no one from the, neither Ben nor Tony are here, nor anyone from the Board of Education itself. And, we have a process here. So, I'd love to grab some other departments, money and use it for the finance department, but that just doesn't happen around the town. I think finance department.
Which offsets are you talking about? Because
It says funding offsets. These are approved appropriations for the BOE that we approved in fiscal year '24. One was for the sewer, which was, right? Isn't that correct, James?
Yeah, there's $500,000 that was approved in the sewer funds in the fiscal 23-24 budget. That's correct.
Correct. And then there's also, it says ADA long lead, and, Roland and I struggled over that one a little bit, but.
Wasn't that also done in the same year this board?
It was.
This board when it didn't approve the A&E for this building, said, well, you need an elevator and you need sewer improvement. So we're going to allocate certain amount of funds just for the OGS project. So it's not a reallocation
Well,
from funds from other
I'm sorry,
projects.
Leslie, then the building committee came in separately. It was in lieu of this project, okay? And to do it. So the question is, James, this money you call ADA long lead, that is from what was approved as the ADA compliance, and for old Greenwich School, it was $1,003,000, is that correct?
That is a correct number, and I can answer that
And what is the
question.
number today?
It's $1,003,000.
Well,
That money has
it
not
says
been
funding
touched.
offsets, $1,048,214. There's another piece of paper that breaks it down better, isn't there?
Sorry, what are you asking?
I am asking about your netting appropriations that we have given to the Board of Education from the school building committee request for these funds. That's
Yeah,
what I'm asking.
I can walk you through that, as, happy to do so. So, that discussion, we've had very in-depth discussions with, the school administration about that. Couple thoughts. Number one is that the sewer funding, which is what's required to, replace the sewer laterals, to install holding tanks, to do some of the diligence on the building, that is non-reimbursable. That will not be, the state will not consider that for reimbursement. So we've had buy-in from Dan Watson and Blaze and then Ben Branyon that they felt like this was a more appropriate use. And I think at the end of this, we'll be able to close out a lot of the balance of the funds in that account and return them to the town. And then on
But these are BOE funds, they're not building committee funds.
Correct.
But you have them in your building committee summary here to us.
We are taking care of it as part of the project. And so that's the rationale, but it has been fully deconflicted. And then in addition, on the ADA piece, so we do need to bring the generator and the switchgear out to bid. We did bring them out to bid with, again, full support from GPS admin to do so. And the reason is that you have 14 plus month lead times to get a generator or switchgear to arrive. So part of the phasing for this plan, we're going to start the new addition this summer, but you can't. It's going to take about a year to get that addition done, and when it's done, it needs to have the generator and the switchgear, which also will, by the way, will power the elevator in the building. So after a lot of discussion with GPS admin for that, people felt like that was an appropriate use of those funds, the $1,003,000 that you cited.
They did not come back here and talk with finance, to the best of my knowledge. They certainly didn't talk to the BET Budget Committee. I don't know about other areas, but when, I know you arrived a little bit late, not that's your problem, but, there was a lengthy discussion with the library about, how they were appropriating their money and the blue sheet for the approval. And when I look at the blue sheet for the approval for these ADA, compliance funds that you're using to subtract from the total cost of the project, it talks about things like, it doesn't mention anything about generating systems or anything. It talks about vertical accessibility. This was meant for elevators, et cetera, but nothing about generators, nothing about that, about upgrading restrooms, about wayfinding or signage in an area lacking. And there was $1.3 million. The idea was that this was going to be in lieu of this project, not in addition to this project. And it was to take care of in this particular case, the elevator and what would be needed to upgrade the restrooms or whatever for Old Greenwich School.
So I can tell you that the restrooms are being handled with, by the building committee funds. The elevator is being handled by the building committee funds. We've been very sort of diligent about the thought that went behind what these items are for. The generator, we have a memo that we can provide you that's been provided to the GPS admin that shows the relevance of the generator and the switchgear for the vertical elevators in the building. Bottom line is the generator and the switchgear will power the elevator to include in a power outage. So if there were kids in the building so that they could actually use the elevator to get out.
Well, again, all I can look at, and, certainly my colleagues here, I share with them, the intent of what this money was for. And so this is just adding another $1,503,000 to this project, because,
No,
is.
that's not our intent.
well, you're
We're
going
not-
to use this appropriation. That's my understanding. In
For-
addition to what we've approved for the building committee, it is your intent, or have already spent the money for the generator. Is that correct?
No, sorry, just in case this isn't clear. So, in the sewer fund that this board and the RTM approved, there was $500,000 in that.
Correct. To fix the sewer problems.
As is pretty clear in our estimate, the sewer with the overhead applied to it is $270,000. So we have spent some of the sewer investigation work. We have used a little bit, like $10,000 of that funding. But our intent is for this to be the balance that we will use, the 270, and then the rest would be returned to the town when the project is closed out. So that's point number one. And then point number two on the ADA, as you said, there's $1,003,000 in that account. It currently stands at
Right.
$1,003,000. The plan here is there's an allocation of $652,381 from the bids that are under consideration that I reported on already. And the idea is that the balance would be returned to the town.
But again, this is like, Finance Department deciding that they want to use some of Mr. Siciliano's money in the Parks and Rec Department. I mean, this money has not been approved for the building committee. It was approved to the Board of Education for their specific projects, and actually it was in lieu of this project.
And we've had very in-depth discussions with them, so it's not someone deciding to use someone else's funds. This has been very clearly discussed and coordinated.
But, so Roland, Pete, doesn't this need to then be appropriated or reapproved for the building committee? Can they just, come in and use any other funds in the Board of Education? I mean, this is the first that I've ever seen this kind of transfer of funds without approvals.
JC.
No, there is, but in that case, it was, I think, decided that it's only a building committee and not this kind, and not going after the state funds because, I guess, of the RTM approval, that required building committees over some. I asked Roland a question.
Some of these projects like this, at that time, we said would be a building committee, and it was like, well, why is a building committee needed for an elevator, for example? And it was, as I remember, if it required MI approval, because you were changing the footprint, it really had to go to the building committee. That was an example of that.
If I can get the discussion back on where we are, so.
Well, I do consider this a discussion where we are.
I know. And I view this particular aspect that you're raising, the Board of Ed is using a building committee to execute the work.
And they aren't here, and they didn't sign the blue sheet.
Okay, I'm sure they will sign the blue sheet, but I view that there's conversations, I believe what we're being told that the Board of Ed is in agreement with this way of proceeding. So I'm going on that basis. But if I move it to the discussion, really what you're getting at is you're trying to see is the scope changed from what we had before and how much the price maybe has changed from what we had before. What we're hearing is They have worked through the pricing, and they are probably, it's slightly higher. You've got a contingency you're asking for, and you've worked through the construction funding that you may be calculating it differently, but you're within, you're very close to what was approved for the project
Yeah.
separately, all right? So what we're talking about now is the scope hasn't changed. The pricing seems to be within what's been approved. The soft costs and the amount of contingency, so the pricing is a little higher than maybe was estimated because we're short on the contingency where we are. We're being told that you don't, the state may flag this as an issue. We don't know that for a fact, but we think it's a possibility. You do have sufficient funds to sign contracts. So if there is agreement by the four of us that the scope hasn't changed, the price is based on detailed work that the building committee has done, I think that the building committee and the state would benefit from knowing that the town is going to fund what's necessary to complete the scope of work that has been approved. And maybe in this case, I hate conditions, but a condition is a way to go. To be able to approve the extra contingency now, let them go to the RTM in January so they know they have support for this, but add the condition that it's subject to showing the need for the funds. And that can be done later on as the project continues, and the BET then controls whether it's an appropriate use of funds or whether it's coming in. It's an alternative. It's a way to potentially get past a different way of looking at this.
So Leslie, talking about a condition is, interesting, and I might consider supporting that. But, when we talk about what's needed, it's, $1,965,000. But really, what we're also saying is over what we approve for the building committee, it's also an addition, $1,003,000 plus $500,000. So it's the number is really $3,468,000 or something like that.
We don't need that much. I would advise against that.
No, you don't have to need that much because you've got the other money for the two appropriations, one for $1,003,000 and one for $500,000.
Which again, we've very clearly defined the scope of what the use of that would be, and that would not be what our ask is. Can I respond a little bit on the to Leslie's suggestion?
Of course.
So, if you were to consider such a condition, my suggestion would be, the pro is that would help us with the state. It would help us to avoid the going through the funding process again as we're getting shovels in the ground. You could probably very specifically tailor it so that it's conditioned on receipt of the GMP at a certain level that we've already specified. And I'm just thinking out loud here, but if the GMP were lower, as an example, then I think it's the 41.4. Okay, then is it?
That would be the construction cost.
Okay, the construction, okay, so it's not this one? It's this one, right? Yeah, so if the GMP came lower, do you see the line in the numbers that say total construction cost 41,399? If it were lower, as an example, then you could, I guess, release a smaller amount of the, not release the full 1,965. And if it's higher, it's a mechanism that you can, hey, reset, you got to come back to see the BET, something like that.
Leslie?
So, Roland?
In the past, we were told that when you went to the state to get approval for these projects, that the monies had to be available and unencumbered with a condition. Is this the same thing?
Yeah, you're correct, Roland, on that. The difference here is that what we're asking for is specifically about the owner contingency, so the we have already submitted that application to the state, and the town has already provided 45,086 of construction, and that has already been included, so that will be no change. But what we would be able to say to the state when we start our discussion with them next week is that, look, we have to get through bidding. The town has asked us to get through the bidding process to the GMP, and at which point the BET would consider the release of conditions on the owner contingency itself. That might be a way to try and thread the needle with the state.
What does Downs have to say about that?
Probably nothing much different than I said earlier, that it's going to be a topic, that the owner contingency is short, but I think the state's going to concentrate on that the scope of work and the ed specs are being met in terms of the construction cost. And that is covered within the budget as we speak. And again, we're focusing on strictly owner contingency. And obviously, as we've said, I don't know what the response will be specifically, but one would say logically that with a potential condition that they would say, okay, at least you're acknowledging that the correct contingency should be X and that there is opportunity following the receipt of the bids to rectify that.
Also, a good explanation is that there's already 11.2% contingency within the project, including the owner's 2%. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of good arguments to, actually support a, condition, as well explained. I mean, the town has stepped up again and again on this project, and so I know everyone's doing good work, but.
My intent is to not have to come back to you again, believe me, even though I do enjoy
we'd
your
love to see
I do
you,
enjoy your
David.
company, and I love hosting you at my meetings. But I agree with you, right? Like, Downs is pretty good at estimating, I think. But do they have a crystal ball on what escalation will be between now and when the bids come in? I'm sorry, guys, I like you guys, but it's not perfect. So yeah, like, if that doesn't come to pass, right, maybe you don't, at the end of the day, need to release the condition. my only ask would be that I think the condition should be measurable and objective, so that if the GMP is at the 41399 level, it's just clear, right? I'm happy to come talk to you about it, but it's just clear so that we know what we have, what the project will have a 7%, that's all.
So Leslie has been drafting some language, so this is not a motion, this is just kind of talking. Can we just have Leslie talk about that? And then, no,
Yes,
really.
yes,
It's
it's
just
your meeting,
discussion.
yes.
And
can
talk,
I-
no, we'll just do that, and then we'll come back to you. So, or did you?
Yes, on the language, and this for Harry's benefit too,
Well, you and Harry like to work together, don't you?
I like to work with everybody, I do. I think the idea of writing these conditions on the fly is not great. So what I would suggest, if the concept of the condition is one that works for the building committee and works for us, that an approval be considered subject to a condition that can be drafted calmly, can be looked at calmly, and evaluated prior to the BET meeting, rather than to try to dash it off on the fly. I don't think that's caused us a lot of trouble in the
I'm
past.
sorry, I don't agree with you, David. Leslie is working on this. I did ask her to, if she could talk about it. And so I've listened to you. I do think that we can start by listening to what Leslie has done. I said it's not a motion. And then we can always start with preparing a condition, and that always can be changed. This is the budget committee, and it always can be refined between budget and full BET, but I'm very interested in what Leslie has written. I called on Leslie first, Harry. I have now learned that David went off on a trajectory here, so I'd like to come back and kind of hear what Leslie has to say.
I kind of like to know what Harry has to say, but just to respond to the chair. So, and this, again, work in progress to see whether this works, but it would be, approval of the $1,923,961 which would be conditioned and subject to release by the BET of an amount equal to wrong word, but to to have a 7% owner's contingency of the GMP.
I would suggest perhaps simplifying it a little bit. Number one, you need to change the number because it's 1965.
Oh, you're right, I'm reading the delay number. I'm not reading the,
And I would just say pending release, pending submission of the guaranteed maximum price at the 41,399 of construction costs or something like that.
I think we want to tie it to the 7%, right? To allow you to have 7%
Okay.
after you know your
So
GMP.
you could say.
So whatever that wording is, that's the concept.
My point is to flag the pending receipt of the GMP, because I think that's an important milestone from what I've heard today. And second, then, and to ensure that the project has a 7% owner contingency.
Yeah,
That's what I would suggest.
but that's David's point to refine the language between now and Thursday.
Yeah, but we can
But that's the
start out.
concept.
That's a concept. And now we'll listen to Harry.
Yeah, I believe, Madam Chair, that a recent meeting you objected to placing conditions on items at the Budget Committee.
No,
Yeah.
I said just the opposite, that we need to start working on them at the Budget Committee. Okay?
My recollection.
So
Would
rather
be-
I think that we do have, there are many cases we put on conditions rather than voting no, okay?
Yep.
Maybe this is a case where everyone doesn't want to vote no. And so maybe this is an area where Leslie has suggested something. It's a first stage. It can be modified at the full BET. But it's a way to, to proceed. It's a way to proceed. But I consider this totally different than a new project, where perhaps we should have turned down. This project is well underway. There's a lot of progress being made by many people. And I actually thought Leslie suggested something constructive. But language can be refined. So that's my view at this point. I do, I think also in this period of time, very short period of time, we need to really look at what our process is for transferring funds from the BOE to the building committee in this point, because I don't think that was I was involved with the approval of these funds, and it was not the original intent.
So-
Intent is always part of it.
Leslie, so part of.
Excuse me a second.
Sorry.
Just, I wasn't totally finished. I said it wasn't my recollection as to what you said. In any case, this is a condition that would be placed on it at the full BET. Correct. Okay, just making sure we're clear on that. Thank you.
However, our motions, if I
But no,
may,
yeah, I think it should be, I think, the point here was that we'd start at the Budget Committee, and it can always be refined at the full BET. Leslie, I'm sorry.
well, no, I just wanted to say, based on the motion that we make here, we can recommend approval with the adoption of a condition, and that can be to see at least where the four of us stand on the concept.
Yeah.
And
Well,
and
but
the language can be
Would the
modified.
condition be,
Part of the motion
No.
for,
Not here.
I'm sorry, we have actually, Harry, go through the record of many meetings we have. I think that,
we don't place conditions, we recommend approval
we
of a
recommend a condition and stuff, and you can
That's what I'm saying.
recommend
She just said-
That's what I
language.
said we could do.
And we can approve that.
And so we're all at least identifying that we're in the same place. I do think that there's some input from the building committee and Downs on doing this. I mean, the wording or the concept that I had that may or not work for them, and we want to know what works, is to release by the BET of an amount to have a resulting owner's contingency of 7% of the GMP. And I think that wording would get there, but does that satisfy what you need?
So I have a question for you. The 7% is not necessarily a number that I've heard, from the other side of my life. So why 7%? And, I mean, Joe, I don't think I've necessarily heard, or maybe I should, Jim, I'm not sure. Construction is actually in DPW, but the projects are over in Joe's side. I just haven't necessarily seen 7%. So where did you get 7%?
Very good question. So right now, we're at 2%.
Well, I know that much.
So, look, as there was a lot of back and forth about that number. What we heard from the team is that what's generally viewed in the market as a bare minimum and typically reserved only for new construction projects is a 5% contingency. This is obviously, as you know, not a new construction project. There is an addition, which has some element of new, but the rest of it is a renovation. And the way it was framed to me is if you had, I think I maybe gave you this anecdote the other day, but I spoke to another building committee in a different part of the state, and they had not done any diligence on the building. So in my mind, as I was knowing, privy to our conversations, I was like, okay, you're going to need a lot more contingency here.
Never be approved in Greenwich, would it?
I hold myself to a higher standard, at least on this. And so, look, if we had not done a lot of the diligence that we've done today, I would certainly be asking you for a 10% or more. I think we're trying to do our best to thread the needle to make sure we aren't sort of overfunding the project, and that we're trying to minimize the additional amount that we're asking of the taxpayer. Is 7% the perfect amount? I basically, we hope so. I hope not to have to come back to you, as I've said. And I think, but we're at that number based on the diligence that we've done, based on the advice from our professionals, and based on our understanding of sort of, the desire here to not overfund the project.
And, using today's numbers, it's about, I'd say it's 17.2 total, so for restoration.
You're saying?
And I mean, so, I'd have to look at the numbers more, but it's probably in the ballpark. I mean, I would, of what is probably good for a mixed new construction and restoration, and based on the percentage square foot of what's what and where, it's probably not bad. But anyway, I was just curious how you'd come up with 7%. Okay, are we ready to move on?
Ready for a motion, or did you have more comments, Harry?
Yeah, I'll move approval of ED1 with the expectation that we will have a condition attached to it at the full BET, and it's non-routine.
So what's my thing?
I second.
Wait a second, I've lost my. I wanted to track otherwise. Okay, so moved by Harry. Seconded by David Weisbrod, that the BET approve $1,965,000 additional appropriation. And,
And that we expect to have a condition attached to the Thursday full BET.
right, but that we're going to craft it, at least preliminary, have one, and that can be modified
Can I
with input.
ask a question about that before we take a vote? Because, the reference to a condition is vague. I just want to get some understanding that are you in agreement with the direction that we're going of the condition? Which
Yes.
is to leave them with the 7%. And I do want to ask the question because there was a lot of discussion of the language that we're talking about. So, that we would release an amount that results in an owner's contingency of 7% of the GMP. If that's the end result of this, the building committee has the resources it's requesting and can move forward with that.
So I actually, can I,
I asked the question. Can I
I
have
know,
him
but
respond?
can I just ask a question? Because
Happy to do it both.
now that she's using the 7%, the 7% is inclusive of the other numbers, which I've now moved my paper slightly. And so, it's really more than 7% because it's the 7% over their contingencies, the way it's being drawn up. Is that correct? It is.
It's flagged as 7% of total construction costs, which is what the number we would be getting in GMP. You should know that by the time we get the GMP, there will be no D&E/bid contingency. That will go away. It will likely become hard cost above that line there.
I hope that's not true.
Oh, yeah, it will become.
Well, yeah, I mean, so do we based on bids, but
Right.
the reality is at this point, it should be assumed that will be trade cost in the bids.
And then a similar thing on escalation, right? Like that will become a zero in the line item by the time the bids have come in.
Right,
means
or
the
else you can make
7%.
the numbers lower, which is
Correct,
Leslie's
and
thing
you
was
could
written,
release a
which is
lower,
right,
you could
right,
release a lower
Right,
amount.
right.
That's the point.
right, yeah, exactly.
Still represents 7%.
And maybe
Right.
you need to say that, or lower, depending on the,
Well, we're going to
Well,
release the
7%
amount
of the GMP.
required to be 7% of the GMP. We will condition this full 1,964,805 and just release what's needed.
so
done.
I have a question for Harry's and David's motion. Do you really want to say that about having the condition in that motion, or do you just want to approve the amount and then just?
No, we're
so
just
that-
approving the amount, but I'm noting that we're expected to have a condition on Thursday. It's not part of the motion.
It's not.
You
It's not
can't,
part of the motion.
you can't make a motion
No.
on an expectation.
Okay, so you weren't
The
clear.
direction is fine.
Yeah, but no, it's my, okay, okay.
We're recommending approval, we're making
Right.
motions on a recommendation.
Yes.
We're not recommend, we don't approve that.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Conversation.
You could, but,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, so we're
Yeah,
doing
all right.
Harry's, and he's
I
not
mean,
going to say
Leslie,
it. It's
Leslie
not gonna
makes a
say-
good point that it should be a motion to approve ED1, recommended approval of ED1, recommended to the BET of approval of ED1 with a condition to be established attached to it on at Thursday's full BET.
I think that's, a little bizarre. Either you're approving it or you're not approving it. Are you approving it,
I was just trying to
Harry?
answer Leslie Moriarty.
I better understand what you guys are trying to accomplish here with respect to this motion, conditioning the condition on.
So just make a regular, straightforward,
Okay,
and then we'll finish
I
the.
move approval of ED1 by the Budget Committee.
I second the approval of,
You're okay with the change?
yes.
And it's non-routine.
Every other motion withdrawn.
It's non-routine, right?
Non-routine.
Okay. Those in favor?
Aye.
3. Those opposed? 0. Those abstaining? 1.
Can you get a mic?
Can
You
we,
have to come over to
can we,
Roland.
question, I thought we were going to do the condition next. Do you want to come and talk before that, or would you like to talk afterwards? I'm happy. Okay, sure.
Just before the full BET meets later this week, that we have absolute clarity with respect to the state's requirements and concerns of any conditions on the funding for this project, any conditions that would be put on the contingency, that does not create a problem for this building committee. I want absolute certainty on that before I vote on this matter on Thursday. Thank you.
That's a very good point, Matt. Thank you very much. I think there's questions about the additional requirement anyway, so, okay, Leslie, do you want to talk about your condition and put that forth?
So I will make a motion to recommend a condition be added that states the following. The subject to release by the BET of an amount that results in an owner's contingency of 7% of the GMP.
Okay, so Leslie, can you just make sure that you,
Write it.
right, send this on the email to everyone? So Leslie made a motion. Does anyone second Leslie's motion? Is it routine, non-routine, Leslie? I mean, this is a recommendation for conditions, so it's a little bit whatever. It's
Yes,
non-routine.
Non-routine.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Seconded by Harry. Okay. And this is a condition. Do you want to read it again? Just the condition, the part?
Release, upon release by the BET of an amount that results in an owner's contingency of 7% of the GMP.
Those in favor? 3. Those opposed? 1. Those abstaining? None. So that motion for a recommendation for a condition has passed, and it, like the actual approval, is non-routine. So you're expected to come Thursday evening.
And I have to explain why I voted no. I want to explain, because to Matt's point, I don't know that there is absolute certainty that any conditions get put on things, the state looks at them, they may not read them, they may not understand them, they may misinterpret them, it's unnecessary, it's superfluous, and it only puts risk on the project. So that's my vote for no on that.
And again, I previously said that hopefully that the team can explain there's already 11.2% there, one way or another. Okay, so are we ready to move on?
Can we
Good.
take a break?
Yes. A very brief break. So what time do we say? 2:35? 2:33? Does everyone want a break?
I'm fine. Either way.
I'll stand up. I don't mind taking a break.
Yeah, I didn't expect the conversation. I'd expect it to take that.
What do we have a problem with?
Nope, I just want to grab this.
Oh, do you want me to unplug it?
No,
we need it plugged in.
Oh.
Where are our friends Leslie and David? Okay, so, just keeping on and making sure we're sort of, and you can stay there, guys. I would like to take up the bonding resolution for the Old Greenwich School Building Committee. And so we have a bonding resolution. Roland has provided an updated version, and it's currently under process review by Robinson and Cole, and it has the section 5 for the Board of Education is authorized in the name and on behalf of the town to apply to the Connecticut Commissioner of Education for any and all state grants and aid for the GHS vestibule project. For the Old Greenwich School Building Committee project, Old Greenwich School, the Old Greenwich School renovation project. How's that, Roland?
What's in the title?
That's what I have.
It says expansion renovation. No, it's this language.
Here, section 5.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Section 5. So we're in the process of approving the bonding resolution, David, for the $1,965,000. There's a new version of the bonding resolution just right over there. It has a new section 5, which I read before, and it needs a correction, which is going to be made. So is there a motion to approve the bonding resolution?
I'll make the motion to approve the bonding resolution.
Motion
Does
made
that need
by,
to be subject to review by Robinson and Cole?
it's going to be reviewed.
Or is this one done?
No, it'll be reviewed. They're both being reviewed.
Okay,
By Thursday, we'll get the review. We just don't have it yet.
all right, I'll second that.
So seconded by Harry Fisher. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? 400. That motion is passed unanimously. Okay, so that's just keeping here. So now we move on, and we have, a request, and we're sort of doing it duo. For Parks and Rec, 265 is for an additional appropriation for electric leaf blowers and facility upgrades. And I'm just going to say this also, and PW 7 for the Public Works for 211,000 for an additional appropriation for electric leaf blowers facility upgrades. And in our packets, we have a memo that covers both of the requested appropriations. Since this is a new requirement and this is based on an ordinance that was put in place last spring at the RTM level. And this is the request for funding for the equipment, for leaf blowers, extra batteries, funds to upgrade charging stations so that you have plenty of outlets to plug them into, et cetera. So who's going to explain this to us? Dan? Or have we said everything?
Good morning. Yes, this is Daniel Carlson, Assistant Director for Parks and Recreation. I've worked with Jim Michael in DPW and Joe Siciliano, the Director of Parks and Recreation, as well as a number of our other staff in order to get this information compiled and analyzed. As the chair said, just for some context, the RTM did pass a resolution having a seasonal ban for gas-powered leaf blowers that was set to begin in May of 2024. Due to the timing of when that ordinance was passed and how the budget cycle works, we were unable to put it in the FY25 budget because we would not get the money until July, which would be past the deadline for compliance. So we did go out and ask for a 3-year exemption from the Board of Selectmen. Through that process, we got a 1-year exemption, so that will get us until May of 2025. That would be next year where we need to be compliant. So with that 1-year exemption, we did a lot of research. We did investigations at all of our sheds to identify what potential upgrades and safety improvements that we would need to store the batteries to make sure that we had the proper amount of voltage and everything to be able to power the equipment. We met with various vendors to do on-site testing of various types of electric leaf blowers to see if they meet our operational needs. And we also did purchase a small amount of pieces of equipment for demonstration purposes to use in our various parks to get feedback on how they work in practicality. So through this process, we kind of went through and identified, based on the specifications and how they've operated, we've identified the number of leaf blowers that we need, as well as the number of batteries and chargers and portable power stations that we are going to utilize in order for us to be able to properly utilize the equipment within the field, as well as identified the necessary electrical and other upgrades, such as purchasing a battery storage cabinet and charging at the various sheds. So we broke those out in separate line items for Public Works and Parks and Recreation. And so that is where we are today. We're putting this request forward so we have enough time to, if we do receive the appropriation, to be able to purchase the equipment, make sure that there's enough time to get it shipped, because as with any other item or material, there is backups and limited supplies in certain cases. But our goal is to be able to, if we did get this appropriation, to be ready for when the compliance starts and our exemption ends in May of 2025. Be happy to answer any questions.
So again, just looking at this, like Public Works, we're going to need to fix this sheet because it, like Leslie said before, it's missing its commas. But do you know how long these batteries last, for a charge? I mean, will they last your workday? I don't know who I'm looking at. How many batteries do you need during the day in order to do the kind of work that your folks do now?
Well, you're going to talk about the industry. I mean, we're looking at industry standards that they give us.
I thought you had, I thought you just said you had tried a couple of these.
Right, but we're looking at the industry standards, and we're also looking at some of the experience that we had. So, and this is what we've decided we would need as a backup for the backup units. I mean, We didn't want to over-ask for batteries, but, you know, I mean, our folks are using them frequently. You know, the experience that we had ran pretty true to what the industry standards with specifications were telling us. And, so we're not over-asking, we're just asking for what we think we need based on our work capacity, and also the amount of acreage, which in parks, it's over 2,000 acres, between parks and schools and, you know, all the other traffic circles and everything else we do is around 2,000 total acres. So we just, and we bought one handheld unit, one backpack unit, so we had some experience, but, you know, we just demoed the equipment to make sure it had the power that we needed to blow the material, and the battery life was in line with what the manufacturers were telling us.
And that was not my question, though, but like, during the day, Joe, when the fellow that was using the backpack or the fellow that was using the other one,
Yeah.
did one battery charge do it for the day, or did you have to
No.
fill 2 or 3
No,
batteries?
I think I answered your question. That's the reason why we're asking for multiple battery backups.
Because you need that many batteries per day.
Yeah, correct. We're not over-asking, we're asking for
No,
what
I
our
didn't know if
experience
they were
tells
like,
us.
you know, standby and, you know, whatever, but no,
Basically,
you need that many batteries per day to do the work,
The standard rating on the batteries is 2 hours.
2 hours. That's a good, okay, that's what I kind of wanted to know. And then,
And that's an estimate, and when we typically see that, it's like, you think of miles per gallon for your car. If you're running it full throttle all the time, it's gonna go quicker. We've noticed it goes quicker than 2 hours. So in this proposal, we kind of talked about it, and we agreed that if we got 3 batteries, and then we had a portable charging unit that we were able to keep with us on the vehicles, that we could charge during the day to keep that ability, and we think that 3 batteries will get us by.
so when you asked for your approval from the Board of Selectmen, the extension, whatever, did you comment at all that, you know, even what the extension that they gave did not allow Parks and Rec and DPW to put it into the fiscal year 26 budget because of the timeframes? I mean, to me,
Well,
they should have gone past this. They should allow one full budget cycle in order for the first application to the first budget cycle.
And in talking with, Ben Brandon made the presentation to the Board of Selectmen, but we provided information. And there was known up front that, you know, if we didn't get a 3-year implementation period, we were going to be asking for an interim appropriation. So we
Okay.
got a 1-year extension.
Thank you. Harry?
I don't remember, and I wish I'd have asked the question at the time, but was the order of magnitude here understood when the ordinance was being discussed? The cost?
Yes, I mean, we actually talked about the number of potential units we would have to replace. This is only 50, at Parks and Recreation level, this is 50% of the blowers that we currently have in our inventory. So we're not asking for a full complement, we're asking for a 50% replacement, and the other one, the current gas one, so we'll have 50% gas and 50% electric. So we're not asking for a full complement of blowers.
But $476,000 was expected at the time?
Well, I mean,
Was anyone
it's a
aware of
large
the-
number. It's a large number.
Was anyone aware of this amount of money being an expected expense as a result of what
Well,
I
I don't
call
think
an
it was,
unfunded
we didn't hide
mandate?
it. I mean, we spoke with Ben about it. Ben made the presentation to the Board of Selectmen and did ask for a 3-year implementation.
Right.
So we got a 1-year grace period to implement. So, you know, the magnitude, I mean, we're just not some small landscaping company that buys 1 or 2, maybe 3
Yeah,
units.
I get it,
I
yeah.
mean, we have 2,000 acres to maintain, and I don't know, I can't quantify what the highway has to do, but we're a commercial operator.
So, question for you, Joe, and following up with Harry's questioning here, did the RTM do any financial analysis that they included with their request for an ordinance to their voters?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, I think that probably would have been helpful. And as I remember it, there was the existing equipment met the noise ordinances. I mean, there was no issue, as I remember, from the Board of Health, is that correct? Am I not remembering correctly?
All of the equipment that we're asking for will meet the requirements.
But what the existing, was this because the existing equipment wasn't meeting noise requirements, or was it just because people would like it to be less noisy?
I think it was both. If you had, my opinion is, was it was both, but it did lean as to, a lot towards a quality of life issue. People said, we don't want to hear any kind, we don't want to hear the gas power blowers, but there was some, proof that, it disrupted, I mean, we were, dealing with soil, pushing soil around, there was some airborne things and things of that nature, but it primarily was a quality of life issue.
Leslie?
Yeah, and I don't think that we should be relitigating the resolution passed by the RTM and the ordinance, and it's in the books, and we have to figure out how to comply. But can you walk me through just a little bit to understand the numbers on this chart? Why 21? You said it's half your numbers, but how many staff members do you have out at a given time? Why 3 batteries per blower plus the portable station? Just to understand the way you developed the proposal.
Yeah, so as we discussed with our staff internally, we were trying to identify within the seasonal ban period how much on average we use the backpack blowers each and every day. And it kind of came down to about 3 backpack blowers on average per shed. We have 5 sheds. But in addition to that, we also have the tree department as well too. Plus 3 for marine and facility operations. So that's how we, for Parks and Recreation, got to our 21 total. In terms of the batteries, as Jim mentioned, it's around 2 hours for each battery to be operated. And our thinking is if we can go in to, and I know Jim was a big proponent of this logic behind this, he kind of do a good job making sense of it, but if we have 3 batteries that last for 2 hours each, we can go in there with our current shed infrastructure without making major improvements to electrical improvements that would be way beyond the scope that we're asking. I believe we could fill 2 batteries like overnight, so where we would have go into the field with 2 full batteries, and then 1 would not be filled. And then we'll have that portable power station that would be fully powered. So when we're working with our first primary battery, we'll have a secondary battery that's primed and ready to go. And then the third battery that is not powered will be attached to that power station, that portable power station, charging as we do the work. So once we get through 4 hours of work through the first 2 batteries, that next battery in line will then be ready to go fully powered, and you can get through essentially your full day with the 3 batteries.
It's a stupid question. They're blowing 6 hours a day constant, right? So they've got to go out with 6 hours of power.
Well, I believe DPW is constant in a lot of their work. Ours can be varied depending on the task. And as Jim mentioned, sometimes there's the 2 hours that it's specified, that's on a specific setting. If you need to go somewhere that it's wet or there's, clumps of leaves, things like that, you're gonna have to use the extra power and you're gonna lose battery life. So I do think that the 3 is gonna get us through the day just barely in most of our jobs.
And this is not necessarily the reason you would do this, but I have to ask the question anyway. Because you have the infrastructure cost in the shed, both the protection for the batteries and the electrical panel upgrades, you're doing it in 5 locations. DPW is doing it in 5 locations, right? Does it lead you to think about changing the way that we allocate our resources? I know that we keep these sheds closer to where our staff is operating and functioning, but now we're increasing the fixed cost, if you will, of operating each shed. We don't have a whole lot of time to change that, so I already know the answer, but I thought I'd put that out there. Is there a different way that we should be delivering or staffing or locating this equipment so potentially to reduce, because all these costs we're gonna have to, what's the lifespan of all these things, right? Is it now a 3-year cycle that we're gonna be replacing things at $500,000 every 3 years or every 5 years? I'm not sure what that is, but.
Well, I don't know if you want to answer.
I was going to
Jim and I
say,
can address this.
I was going to say, I think one of the big things that we did look at with this is what is kind of a minimum thing we can do to these sheds? Knowing that we do have a couple of the various sheds that are scheduled for replacement in the coming years as well. So we didn't want to make a huge investment because if we were to truly do this for the whole fleet and full power, so forth, we'd probably be looking at all new services basically from the poles out on the street into the systems and making a significant upgrade to these buildings, which would have been a significantly higher number than you even have in front of you today, which we knew was gonna shell shock because it was shell shocking us. And so when we looked at that, we said, how can we make these improvements palatable for this and go from there? So that's.
Harry?
The portable chargers, are those powered by fossil fuel? What are they powered by?
Well, they get, go ahead.
For lack of better terminology, if you think of a little brick that you have for your cell phones, it's just a really big brick for this. So you charge it at night and it comes out, and then you plug in your chargers during the day. It's not a gas-powered generator that you're running on the side of the road.
Thank you.
So, someone sort of got here, but I didn't understand. Is this about the same amount of equipment that you would have if you had gas blowers, number one? And number two, is the cost, including the backup battery and, the extra power generator, whatever we call this, portable power station, how do these costs compare to operating with gas blowers in terms of costs?
Well, I think the purchase of the equipment is probably comparable to a gas blower. It's the additional batteries that you need that are driving the cost. And so what happens is that, with gas, we have a portable gas tank, we fill up the blower, keep going. And in this case, we have to rely on other resource, of which is a battery pack. And probably, a significant amount of this is driven by the battery packs that we need and also the setups that we need to charge those batteries, whether it's a portable unit or whether it's in the building, overnight in the cabinetry that we're gonna have to provide. Actually, we have to meet some fire marshal requirements about charging batteries exterior. I mean, you can't charge this, you read about lithium batteries all the time, how they create fires and such, so we have to work in a safe operation. So a lot of this is being driven by what else we need other than the blower itself.
And so I think what you're sharing is, though, and this was a good question, Harry, that none of this was considered by the RTM when they put forth this ordinance. They didn't look at the practicality issues of operating. And by the way, while I have great sympathy and I am a taxpayer, I also use a private sector lawn service that I've had for decades. And so I'm also sympathetic to the smaller business people that we have that have to adapt to this ordinance, buy the equipment, try and set up these charging stations. I'm sorry, explain what you do to protect against fires, because that obviously, that's been a subject that Harry keeps reminding us about, including Tesla cars. So,
First of all,
indoors, charging them indoors.
I'm sorry, first of all, we have to provide the right electrical service we're gonna be buying fireproof cabinets, like you store gas in a fireproof cabinet exterior of the building. We're gonna be doing something similar to that. Is a fireproof cabinet that's gonna be wired into the electrical service, and the cabinets are fire rated, so that, you're protecting the structures that you're housing people in or other equipment in. So it's gonna be not within the building, and most likely be outside the building, and it'll be fire rated cabinetry, and it'll be an improved electrical service. It should kind of minimize the actual potential for a fire.
What does improved electrical service mean?
Well, we're upgrading electrical servicing here in order to make sure we have enough power to charge the batteries. So that should help us. We're not trying to overtax the electrical service that we have currently and we're going to be putting them in fire-rated cabinets.
Thank you.
Is there any concern about the size or appearance of these exterior cabinets?
No, I wouldn't, we have a few right now for gasoline. I mean, they're the
But it
they're the
sounds like
size
you're
of
gonna have a
there's
lot
like
more.
a double size of a stand-up file cabinet. You know, if you've seen with double doors like this, they're about that size, maybe a little bit bigger. They're properly vented so that the air circulates and such, but I don't see any issue with,
They're fire rated for an electrical fire?
they're fire rated totally, but
They're specifically designed for this type of usage.
Right.
They are designed for battery
For
charging.
lithium battery, they're basically a lithium battery
The
storage
best way
cabinet, so.
to, the best way to stop a fire is to smother it. So the fact that it's ventilated, it gives me pause.
Well, all of these cabinets, whether gas or electric, they're vented because, you know, you don't want to have just you need some ventilation of some sort. But the cabinets are rated, and they'll be approved by the fire marshal's office, and we'll do the installation in a safe manner.
David?
So Joe, Jim, the existing,
Your mic.
Your mic.
oh, sorry, the existing gas-powered blowers, what'll happen to them?
What will happen to them?
Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely have a few, in the beginning, a few extras that we can use, actually, it will save our request for asking for additional gas power blowers for a while. We can use them for parts. I don't know if there is a market for selling them off, but because now everybody's converting to electric, so the gas power blower becomes not that popular on a resale.
No, so that's my question. What do we do? What would we do with them?
We could check with purchasing to see if there's an actual market for resale of gas blowers, but all people are converting to electric. Even if you look online and contractors, nobody's buying, they're trying not to buy gas. They're
But aren't
trying
you
to
gonna?
convert over to electric.
Aren't you gonna use them in the shoulder seasons?
Well, we're gonna use both complements during the shoulder season.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, and also, there is an exemption to be able to use gas-powered leaf blowers for storm response within the updated ordinance. So even within the seasonal ban, if there's a storm, we're able to utilize our gas-powered leaf blowers to be able to get that taken care of. So
So of the gas-powered, Joe, oh,
Yeah. So, okay, so that's, thank you for your time. Thank you for your time.
thanks, Joe. Of the gas-powered blowers, is there, have some been fully amortized or depreciated and some brand new? Or, I guess, let me get to the point. The thinking I have is that, you know, this is a large capital request. And the question would be, ideally, you would phase a thing like this in over 3 years, as you were intending to do to begin with. So to the extent that there may be some of the gas-powered blowers that are already fully depreciated or not really worth much, or, you know, maybe they have long lifespans, they may be almost indestructible, I don't know. But if there were some that were already fully depreciated and we didn't, that would trouble me less than ones that we may have just purchased and have a little bit of a life left on them.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, like we've said, both of our requests are for basically 50% of our current blower fleet. And then our intent was to, as equipment, you know, dies on us, we replace them periodically. And that's kind of the program we have right now, that if we've got the fleet already that we need, and we've been, you know, if one blower dies this year, we're replacing it, utilizing our operating account. So this would be just kind of following that same process for the existing blowers. We would keep them in hand for the shoulder season. I was gonna tell Joe, if his guys aren't gonna use them, if you've been out and around the town right now, you can probably see our guys are using them right now. So that's a time that we're able to still utilize the gas-powered ones and would continue to use them during that time.
Right. And last question, is it even feasible? I know the request went in for a 3-year implementation and that was denied. But to restore that request, what's involved there? Does it require a change in the, is it simply a Board of Selectmen vote?
Yes.
I thought it was the town administrator can do it, but I think what happened the last time was defer to the Board of Selectmen, isn't it?
Well, I recall that when DPW and Parks and Rec asked for a 3-year implementation, the Board of Selectmen said, no, let's make it 1 year and we can always extend it.
Okay.
That's basically the way it came out, so.
I think your request was warranted for the 3-year. That's my view.
Yeah, I agree.
I also think that it, at minimum, should have allowed for the purchase within a budget year, for approval during the budget cycle. And the way this was approved, did not allow for approval within the budget cycle. That's my own comment.
And
Leslie?
my comment is the RTM passed an ordinance. There is a request for both private and public change to use electric during a certain part of the season. Our role as the finance board is to implement and finance the resources that our departments need to follow the ordinances. And I'm looking for ways to give our crew an alternative in implementation and potentially not other people, I don't think is.
So I will make a comment. I don't think it's appropriate not to, or to have our people not comply with regulations, but I think regulations need to be realistic. David, I'm going to repeat something I've said to you before, and I want a list, and I'm going to start, we're going to work together. Unfunded mandate. I see this as an unfunded mandate from the RTM. Because the RTM has passed an ordinance without a budget, without understanding the impact on the people, and so here's a start for a list. I'm going to start, we're going to do it jointly.
Hopefully it'll be funded this week, so.
So hopefully so. So do I have, at this point in time, we've talked about this a lot, do I have any motions?
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of PR1 for $265,000 for electric blowers.
Motion made by Leslie Moriarty. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'm gonna second the motion, and I pre-note that I will vote in favor. However, without any conditions, we're not doing that. But I would really love to see if there were a way that we could have this, just my voice, amortized over 3 years. But that's outside of my control. So I'm seconding Leslie, and we'll vote in favor.
So, again, I would prefer this, if it's to come within a budget cycle, not as an interim. I think that there's little concern, and there should be concern about what, interim requests used to be for emergencies. They didn't used to be for something that should be the town's annual process. I'm going to take a vote. Those in favor of the motion made by Leslie, seconded by David? 2. Those opposed to the motion made by Leslie, seconded by David? 2. That motion has failed.
Can I ask for those who voted against the motion, what is your recommendation to the departments that are not getting the resources they need to
Well, I think we've
implement an
already talked
ordinance?
about that, didn't we? We talked about the upcoming budget cycle. We talked about asking the town administrator for an extension. But I don't think we need to, we've already discussed those things.
I echo Ms. Tarkington's comments. This should be in the budget cycle, and they should go back to the authorities and request another extension.
So
I'm going to make a motion, though, for PW7. I think we should complete the agenda and have it
absolutely.
on the record.
Yes.
To recommend approval of $211,000 for DPW for electric blowers.
I second the motion.
So motion made by Leslie Moriarty, seconded by David Weisbrod for PW7 for Public Works for $211,000. Those in favor?
Aye.
2. Those opposed? 2. Those abstaining? 0. So that motion, once again, has failed. So I thank you very much, Dan, for putting together the memo and all the work. This is an operating request. And
Can I just follow up on this, because our chair controls the agenda for BET's meeting, which happens to be this Thursday night, will you be putting these two items on the BET agenda?
I don't know, I'd rather discuss that offline.
So, so thank you very much.
And if we're putting in, if we're being somewhat directed to put this into next year's budget as an operating expense or as a capital?
No, Roland has stated that this is not a depreciable item. These are,
Yeah, you're right.
no, I asked Roland, so,
You know, the threshold for capitalizing equipment is $10,000 per item, and I believe these cost about 250,
2,000 per.
or 2,000, yeah. So it's below the threshold.
so this is an operating, it would go in operating. And, in the 300s and 400s, you weren't involved in the discussions, but Dan was. And Dan and Joe were also in the discussions that it's operating. And that's how it's presented here, and that's how it would be requested for the, for the budget. And, yes. Again, please use the microphone, though, Matt. So, Matt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could I also request that when you do come before the BT on Thursday with the now what is an operating expense, you also include the savings associated with the energy cost savings, the gas that will no longer be purchased, as well as the maintenance savings. I mean, those are readily available numbers. Many towns have done that analysis. I think it would be beneficial for the Finance Board to know the full cost savings or net costs associated with this requirement. And I also just want to make sure that the BET, my colleagues, know that this was heavily debated within the RTM. Quiet Yards did extensive research on this. It was presented to the full RTM as well as the districts. Each of the districts received information on this, and the other costs that may be outside of the scope of the BET are the externalities associated with this particular issue, and this is an ordinance that was passed pretty handily by the RTM, and I think the Finance Board, when we meet on Thursday, should be discussing that as well. Thank you.
So, I'm sorry, I should have called on you before, but I didn't see you raise your hand before. Okay. So, I think, Dan, that we're finished. I mean, but I think that Jim has other applications on our agenda, so he can just continue to sit there. I was planning to say this later, but for anyone who expected it, there had been some discussion before about having Jim come back and talk about the North Street Bridge engineering report. And David had asked that it be on the December agenda, but when I had, we'll call it an informal discussion with Jim, he indicated that he didn't think he would be ready for the December meeting and would prefer to come in January. So we're going to we haven't forgotten, we're just going to, follow up with Jim. And hopefully you are already in January, is that correct? Because we'd like to get this done before we start the budget cycle.
That would be our goal, yes.
Okay, great, super. So anyway, that just, you weren't forgotten. Our next item on the agenda is PW5, which is Public Works. And we also have Rich Feminella joining us, and he is our superintendent of the...
Wastewater Division Manager.
What is it called?
Wastewater Division Manager.
Wastewater Division Manager. Yeah, you notice I was a little hesitant of what we call that.
Otherwise known as the sewer guy.
Yeah, I was gonna say sewer superintendent, but, okay. So, what we have here is $2,315,048, a transfer, really, of ARPA. This is the American Rescue Plan Act account transfer within department. There are deadlines to meet, and I assume that this is why you're coming and requesting a transfer.
Yeah, it's a mixture of trying to meet the deadlines and also just that we've gotten further along and we've completed the majority of the work on several of these projects, and we've gotten bids back on, for instance, the Den Lane project, and the bids were, when we first put the budget number together was before we really had the project in design, and so we had a rough estimate of what it would cost, and we got bids back very favorably on that one, so we have extra funding for that, and we're looking to move it into accounts that we know we can utilize in the next 2 years.
So does anyone have any questions on this? Leslie?
Yeah, so I went back to look at what the open appropriations are on each of these items, and your discussion here says that you're going to complete all 5 projects, but that the total cost will be lower by 1.5 million. But I just wanted to find out that your intent on the scope of addressing these 5 projects hasn't changed. Like you said Den Lane Pumping Station is going to happen. It's going to be less money than the project expects. Valley Road drainage, are we still doing that? Are we not doing that?
We're completed it. We've completed that project, and the scope was significantly less than what we anticipated when we were given this gift.
Okay, Byram River levee maintenance, you're removing almost all the funding from that project. Is that still an initiative for the department?
We do annual inspections, the Army Corps does annual inspections of that, and we were anticipating that there might need to be more work done, but we've worked with the Army Corps to make sure that we're complying with their regulations for that levee, and that's what we needed for this project.
So we're doing less than we thought. I mean, right?
When we were asked for various projects, we thought there might be more there than what is necessary, but we feel that this will fulfill the need for what maintenance we need to do there.
And then Pembroke drainage?
We worked very efficiently and revised that design, and we got that project completed this past summer.
So all of those you're completing them, but they're all really for lower costs. And Grass Island is something that you always might need more money for, but, and the upgrade projects that are anticipated by this funding can be committed and completed in the timeframe that the ARP requires?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I think this is great that all projects are moving along, and that you've identified a project that needs these financial resources and also will help the fiscal 26 budget. So do I have a motion or any other comments? Any other comments, David? No?
No.
So I'll make a
Karen?
motion.
Go ahead.
I'll make the motion to approve the transfer of funds among DPW projects in the ARP fund of $2,315,048.
I'll second it, suggest routine.
Okay, so Leslie's moved, Harry second, $2,315,048, a transfer between DPW, ARPA, or what was ARPA to other ARPA projects. Those in favor? So that motion has passed unanimously. So we have another project, PW6. It's DPW for $603,000. It's a transfer, another transfer ARPA project. And and this is from the Den Lane pumping station to the Costco pumping station upgrade. You want to just give us?
Basically the same thing. It was just, we split up the excess that we had in the Den Lane and sent it to 2 different accounts, and they wanted it on 2 different sheets, so.
Leslie, can I just make a suggestion? You're supposed to move you're supposed to move the item and then discuss it. I think you're doing it a little back.
I don't know, we've always done it this way, Karen, thank you.
Karen is technically correct. I've made the point before.
Okay, well, that's changing what's been a budget committee process.
Read Robert's rules.
I think that will bring up a lot of questions in the future, since this is kind of a,
Well, I think going forward, you can, we
Can we get back on the agenda, please?
I think this is out of order, Karen. But anyway, called on you, sorry, out of order. So we're talking about this cost cub, and we agree?
I'll make a motion, if that's okay, for DPW to recommend approval of a transfer of $603,000 among ARP projects and to be routine.
I'll second that. Agree with routine, and I have a question.
Because this is probably the time to ask your question before
Yes.
we vote.
We already gave you a boatload of money for Casco Pump Station. Why does it need more?
This is,
Harry, what we will do is move $2.3 million or $603,000 from the existing project and set that up. We'll reduce that by $603,000 from what we approved and just move it over into the ARPA funds. So the total project remains the same at this point. We're
It's
simply
just the
going to
funding that we're changing
reallocate
here.
the funding.
Okay, so we're just changing the funding. It's not that the project got more expensive.
No, only
Okay,
funding.
thank you.
it's not right, though.
So I'll take a vote on this. Moved by Leslie Moriarty, seconded by Harry Fisher. The transfer of the ARPA funding from the Den Lane pumping station to the Costco pumping station. Again, well, excess funding, but also a project that will meet the 2 federal requirements. Correct? Those in
Well,
favor?
I just want to make sure what Roland's saying. So this 600,000 we need for the
project.
the design of the, finish
get
the,
it to
finish
get it
the
to bid,
design
yeah,
project.
To go out to bid, yes, sir.
Oh, this does not request a new appropriation.
Bec-
So we need, good question, Harry.
Yeah, now you've got me confused. You're talking about more design money for Casco? I thought this project was already bid.
No, the project was not bid.
Then how did we know that it got so much more expensive? You came back to us in the spring looking for more money
No,
because the bids came in
that was
above
for the
expectation.
Grass Island Wastewater Treatment Plant primary settling tank.
No, it was
project.
Casco.
The time that we came for interim funding was for the primary settling tank project at Grass Island.
I'm remembering Casco, Roland.
Casco was anticipated and put into the budget request for the construction before the design was completed, which the design still isn't complete. It's going to be completed in the next few months to go out to bid. The interim funding last year was for the Grass Island Wastewater Treatment Plant that had gone out to bid, and the bids came in higher than what was available. So that was what the interim funding request was that was approved through the BET and then through the RTM, sir.
Okay. It's not my recollection, but I'll look back. Thank you.
But I think something's been raised here. Roland, is this are you saying that we need to modify our sheet here and modify our approval to increase the funding for the Costco pump station? Because this is not what this says. This says it's just a transfer of funding from using ARPA rather than using bonding, from the Den Lane pumping station to the Costco pump station. But are you saying that
Right,
this
and
project is
there's-
also increasing its cost by $603,000?
Just to the background, I'm looking at the CIP sheet from the approved budget. The Costco pump station is a $20,750,000 appropriation. So that's what's on the books, and we're moving far less than that from ARP, of the ARP funding.
And there's design funding in the ARPA accounts that was intended for the preliminary design process.
Correct. That's what that was.
And this is to get us all the way through the final design process. So this is just like the
Grass Island
the
one.
first one that we talked about was adding funding into the Grass Island ARPA account. this would be adding funding into the CASCOB ARPA account.
Oh, well, maybe we didn't approve the first one right. Let's talk about this one and then we can go back. I'm confused. Leslie?
So you're saying that
I'm
because
not saying
the,
anything. I'm saying this looked like it was a transfer. It says transfer.
well, it's a transfer, it is a transfer. You're transferring from one ARP project to another project.
Correct.
The dollar amounts were always going to change. Your question, so, you know.
So this I look at, and Roland, am I correct? This is only funding for a project. We're now saying, okay, we're not going to bond, or we're going to do 600 and whatever it is, 603,000 less bonding for the Costco pump station than we had originally planned because we don't no longer need it for Den Lane. This is not saying that we're also increasing the appropriation. But I think what Jim is saying is Jim needs an increased appropriation. Is that correct? And Leslie, you're now looking at this. You're looking at several things. What are you telling us?
I'm looking at the open capital. You have a project for COSCOB's design, correct? I'm looking at, I have, the latest one I have is October 18th, open appropriation in front of me. And it's all American Rescue Plan. That's the sewer division. So sewer maintenance. I don't see sewer having open. So the question first is, where is the COSCOB design fund coming from? Which capital account? There was an ARP COSCOB pump station upgrade project that was approved in the original one for $800,000.
Right.
That is spent to zero. There's encumbered funds as of October, but it's zero. So they're putting more money into that. We approved 20 million for construction funding. So the question is raised, you need more money for A&E. Right now, your open appropriation has you taking A&E funds from construction, which happens sometimes, right? But it's not kosher necessarily. It's not 100%, but you want to make sure the 20 million in the construction can cover everything they need. And it looks like Rich is thinking about that.
Well, this is what
They have money. I mean, we'd be switching money from that 20 million construction number out.
We'd be
Or no,
switching.
we are adding more money to that necessarily.
We're adding more.
And we're reducing another project, which we're permitted to do under that resolution that was passed.
For ARPA.
For ARPA. So we don't need another motion, or I think our motion covers what
As
we're
long
allowed
as
to
we don't
do.
add. As long as we don't add.
No, it doesn't say that. The resolution.
This does not say that this is a new appropriation. This is a transfer of funding. That's what this
Well,
one
it's
says.
this is an open project. It's an open project in ARP for COSCOB funding. And so we are not doing a new project.
But that's not what I heard from them. They're saying they need more money for design, that the money for construction is for the construction. Is that what I'm saying?
But there's
What
design
is your-
money that's open,
So-
right here.
So the appropriation that we got for ARPA for COSCOB was for the design phase. And what we're asking for is this money from the Den Lane, which was for the construction of Den Lane, to be moved to the COSCOB design in ARPA, all staying within this ARPA world, and funding that COSCOB final design phase.
But you're saying you need more money. Question. Are you saying you need more money to complete the design work? That you need another, whatever it is, $603,000 to complete the...
Looking at what we have left in the encumbered funds and available funds, we need additional funds to complete the design, correct?
which, when we were looking at the, we've had this kind of in the back of our head, and so when we were going through and looking at this, we felt we would have a ballpark number of what we would need in for Cascab, and we would look to transfer that over. And so this has been kind of something we looked at all the way back to last year's budget, when we were going through it.
But you're spending more than 800 for the design for Cascab.
Correct.
Correct.
That number
The
was
Cas-
based on.
the
a-
Cascab will
This is-
basically be
the way
it'll
this is
basically
written,
be
we have the
1.4
authority to do
total for the
And
design.
additional
Yes,
appropriation?
so the resolution that we passed in the budget
This doesn't
guidelines, the
say this,
RTM.
though. It needs to say additional appropriation.
This isn't well, it's
No.
adding money to an open project, so it's additional, but the source of funds is a
No,
transfer.
you have to have the appropriation mirror it. This mirrors this. This is the funding for it. You need the appropriation. They're saying they need additional money. We're not appropriating additional here. It can be added to the other, but we're not appropriating additional here. You're saying, I asked the question, do you need additional funding? And you said, yes, we need. Am I correct? But you didn't ask for that in
So
the
is
sheet.
the 800,000 going up to 1.4 million for design?
So I think
Correct.
the
That's-
800,000 was preliminary design, right? So when that number, so those numbers, when the whole ARP, concept came out, there was, I think, very little time at the time frame, and there was kind of,
We're trying
back
to
of the
help.
envelope.
We're trying to make sure that we're doing it the right way.
Anticipated
So-
ideas, right? So
so
there
yeah.
was, so there was money there for Den Lane, there was money there for Cascab, and there was money there for Grass Island, right? So at that time, it's kind of best guesses. So I think what Jim's saying is that last year, when we even talked about the ARPA projects, and we had the money in the request for the construction for Cascab, because we're trying to get the thing done and get out to bid. And the concept and the discussion, at least that I understood, and maybe I misunderstood, was that as long as there are projects, if you come in under budget on one, it could be applied to the other, and we would come back to make the request, which is what the request is, right?
Right.
So Den Lane came in under, right? That's already bid, awarded, the whole 9 yards, and the construction is gonna start very shortly. So we needed more money to finish the design, to be able to go out to bid, and the anticipated schedule is this spring.
So
So the construction money is still
No, what-
needed for the
what
construction.
Leslie's pointing out
Yeah.
is we can make this change, but if the total project cost is increasing because of this transfer, that we need to also, you're saying we need to appropriate it to allow you to spend money on this project. We have the authority to transfer it, and we have the authority, do we have the authority to increase the appropriation, or does that have to go to the RTM?
no, it has to go to the RTM.
No, I mean, I think that's,
Stays within the department.
No, the money, your funding does, but this is a new appropriation. He wants an additional $603,000.
not really,
We can move the money around within
yeah.
drainage or within the sewer.
No, he doesn't have enough money for his project, Roland. What Jim is saying, and
No, there's enough money in this ARPA DPW
Yeah,
pool.
it's ARPA pool.
It's the ARPA DPW pool, and we have a lot of it over in this finger, and we're moving it over to this finger, but it's still in this same hand that we're doing, and we're not asking for any additional money to be put into this.
And we've done this with other departments.
well, now
previous
I'm
months.
totally confused. I thought I asked you, do you need another $603,000? The answer is no, you don't need $603,000.
There's no additional money necessary, correct?
Okay,
It just
well,
needs
then
to-
we're fine.
It just
But I
needs to
think-
move
I think
from
the
one,
con- I
yeah,
think the
just,
confusion
spent
was, I
differently,
think the
that's all.
confusion was, I think the confusion though, and maybe this makes more sense. I think part of the confusion was that in the first project we were talking about, Grass Island, what we were saying was, if we were able to move the funds, right, we can reduce the overall 25-26 request, because there's a line item in there to bring the Grass Island wastewater treatment plant headworks design to final completion of $2 million, right? So by doing the funding that you talked about in the first resolution for us, for DPW, we could then go back in and revise that request in the budget for that item. So I think when Roland was talking about the number, like, it almost sounded like we were going to then reduce the number that was for COSCOB, the 20 million number, by 603K, and we're saying, no, that doesn't work. So I think as long as we're just talking about moving the funding that's already in the ARP funds to appropriate it for finishing the design.
See, to appropriate for finishing the design.
No.
If you read
If you read what we approved, they have a bucket of money, they're allowed to reallocate that bucket of money. And yes, some projects will go up, other projects go down, but the ones that go up don't need an additional appropriation
Right.
for more money.
If you read what the resolution says, and I'll read it verbatim, subject to approval of the BET, each town department with unspent funds from previously approved ARPA committee projects shall be permitted to transfer such unspent funds to other ARPA committee-approved projects within their department. So this is basically a transfer from the one ARPA project to another ARPA project.
So Karen,
within
then, using your thing, then we need to actually, it's not only reduce the funding for the Den Lane pumping station, we need to reduce the appropriation because we're transferring the appropriation from the
Correct.
Den Lane pumping station to the Den Lane, or to the Cobb pumping station.
One will go down, the other will go up.
Well, yeah, but we've only been doing it for the funding. So Roland, question for you. Now, what they're suggesting is that we actually reduce the Den Lane pumping station appropriation by 603,000.
Yes.
Not only the funding, but the appropriation.
That is the funding, the appropriation.
It goes along.
And we increase the Cobb pumping station by 603,000.
That's the motion that's on the table.
It doesn't say that, though. It does not say that. This is only a transfer of the funding. We need to say we're also transferring the appropriations. I have no problem doing it, if that's what this is saying, but then the sheet needs to change.
We've never.
No, Leslie, we're moving the budget from one project to another one, just like that's like a budget transfer.
Okay.
Roland, I think what,
Bring a mic over. Get another mic.
I think what Leslie is saying is that we're in actuality reducing the funding from one and increasing the funding for the other. So for bookkeeping purposes, you just need to,
We'll close that budget out.
right,
and move-
okay,
And move it up. That's
and
what
move
we
it
did.
up.
That's fine.
All right, can we take a vote?
Yep. That was your, those in favor?
Motion's on the table.
Aye.
Okay, so that motion passed unanimously, 400, and that was routine also, right, Harry?
Both of those are routine, Jim.
And you'll let us know if we
I
need
will.
to show up on Thursday.
No, we don't need to come.
No, on the other ones. I haven't decided yet.
See you in January on North Street.
Have you gotten the report in yet? Weren't you getting a report in?
Let's go. It's almost.
Come on.
Gonna
Okay.
be 4 o'clock.
Okay, so the next one we have is Registrar of Voters. Approval to use, $19,800. And we have actually 3 separate requests. And we're saying our names and whatever because we're doing this for our minutes now. But we know you're Fred and Mary, Molly.
Yes, Fred Picaro and Mary Hagerty, registrars of voters. Can we amend that to include an extra microphone for that table over there? We'll include that in the budget so that.
We just
I know.
forgot to ask for it.
They're a little short, actually. We have the same problem during the budget season. It's even worse.
All right, so do you want to go through them one at a time, or it might be best to do the?
Just quickly, you can go
Sure.
through them, each of them.
Okay, so RV1 is some additional renovations to our office, which is primarily in the form of additional filing cabinets. That represents 12,500 of the item. We are taking one of our closets and making the ceiling fire resistant, and the majority of the other costs are either the labor to do that. The only remaining item is we're adding some additional AV equipment for our conference area for training purposes, which is de minimis, it's $1,000. So that's the full, and we include contingency. And those numbers all came to us from DPW, totaling $19,800. All of this comes from the Election Excellence Grant, which was approved by the RTM in January 2023. There's no cost to the taxpayers here.
So, should we just quickly, anyone, questions?
Nope.
Motion?
Motion to approve the use of grant funds for $19,800.
Second.
Motion made by Leslie
Routine.
Moriarty,
Suggest
seconded by,
routine.
Routine.
by
So then if I
David
may.
Weisbrod.
You didn't-
Those in favor? Aye. That passed unanimously. Okay, the next one,
Okay,
please.
so RV2 is basically a transfer of funds from us to the Board of Education. So we earmarked about $150,000 of the grant and approached the Board of Education to say, where could you use this money on entrances and exits that benefit voters that are not the standard entrances and exits? So we left it to their discretion, and they, using the plan that they had already had of evaluating all of their ADA places, came up with Western Middle School and
Street,
and
North Street.
and North Street, correct. So the estimates are theirs. It also includes contingency. They made the decision on what schools, but we were happy with it because in particular, Western Middle School has been of concern to us for a very long period of time, that particular access way. So we're happy to see that funded, and it has a general benefit beyond the voters. And again, it costs no funding to the taxpayers. It is entirely funded by the Election Excellence Grant previously referred to.
Okay, any questions?
No, I'll make a motion to approve $140,800 of the grant for ADA improvements.
I'll second that. Suggest routine.
Okay. Motion made by Leslie Moriarty, seconded by Harry Fisher. Those in favor?
Aye.
So that motion passed 400 unanimously. And we have a third project, RV3, Registrar of Voters for $17,236,000.
Yeah, so this is a grant that comes from the state of Connecticut. So we are not a department that has enabling resolutions to accept grants. It's unusual for us to have them, and yet the state has now given us 2 grants in the last 7 months related to early voting. This one for fiscal year '25, which we are in. And the amounts are determined by a formula in the Secretary of the State's office. We received the 9th largest grant in the state for $17,236. For grant accounting purposes, because there's all sorts of paperwork we have to done, we're putting it all towards poll worker pay. We have already paid those poll workers, so in fact, that money is just going to get returned to the general fund.
Terrific.
Does that comply with the requirements of that grant, that you're allowed to use it for
Yes,
expenses
anything
already?
associated
labor
with early
costs?
voting.
Yeah.
And our costs for early voting salaries, just not including anything like DPW or any of the other things, were about $30,000. So it still doesn't cover it, but it's nice to have the money back.
I'll make a motion to approve the use of $17,236, the state grant for poll worker pay.
I'll second the suggestion it's routine.
Okay. Motion made by Leslie Moriarty, seconded by Harry Fisher for the Registrar of Voters for $17,236 for, to use a grant for poll worker pay. Those in favor?
Aye.
That
Can I
motion
just-
is and that's routine, and that motion is passed 400.
Just before you leave, how much of that Center of Excellence grant is remaining? Do you know?
About 200, once everything is expended, what has not been appropriated is still about $200,000.
Thank you.
Yep.
It's very easy to give money to the town, it turns out.
That's great. Thank you, guys, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being patient, too. Sure. Okay, so our next item is TAG. It's a release of conditions, and it's a contribution to TAG for the second half of the fiscal year. Release of the conditions comes in December for $154,000. Mike Miller submitted his package, and we've had the opportunity to review it. And because of the great progress they're making, I did poll the Budget Committee members, and no one felt it was necessary for Mr. Miller to attend today. Harry, you had a question?
Yeah, no, I'll move approval of TA2 and suggest routine.
I'll second.
Harry Fisher moved, seconded by Leslie Moriarty as a routine item. The release of conditions are tagged for their second half contribution of $154,000. Those in favor? 400, that has passed unanimously. Our next item, we have a very patient executive director for Nathaniel Witherall, is Nathaniel Witherall, 60,000 additional appropriation for a tray line. So, welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you for seeing me. Right, so to finish executing the tray line pod service, several electrical system upgrades are needed due to new equipment power needs at the new locations where the equipment's being placed, as well as panel upgrades to support those new lines. And our first layout, which was used to create the original budget, we planned on placing the equipment in locations where existing electrical outlets were in order to save money. That wouldn't have required any modifications. However, due to a redesign based on actually placing workers where they're ultimately going to stand and then placing the equipment appropriately, what we realized was that that original workflow really wouldn't work with people where they were stationed and the equipment being where it was originally in the new plan. So to add the new outlets with a new panel is what we're requesting the $60,000 appropriation for, interim appropriation for. The labor is $25,000, and the parts to upgrade the panel, new circuits for the new equipment, and new outlet locations, and remove the unused outlet locations. The parts $35,000, and the labor is $250,000.
Have any questions?
Yes.
Harry?
Do I recall that the original bids on this were below budget?
No, that actually was,
Was something else in the kitchen?
yes, it was a code compliance, it was the hood, that's what you're referring to.
Okay.
Yes, and we came in, yes, very well under budget for that.
How much was that under budget?
We had originally asked for, I think, $230,000 was the request, and
The original request for the kitchen code compliance was $300,000.
all right,
Came in at $232. We're going to close that project out. That is completed, and there are two other projects that we are going to close out this week, actually. And those are smaller amounts that are being given back, but those are older projects.
But the
so cleaning them
closeouts
up.
are essentially going to cover this.
So that's $232,000 is the one. The other one is $7,800 and $1,100. So those are small.
Right.
But at least we're getting them closed and cleaned up.
Yeah, but it covers.
And this project, really, we want to accelerate or try to expedite as much as possible because it's going to save you labor.
yes, 1.5 to 2 FTEs.
How quickly can you get this completed, to get the money, which you won't get for another, month?
About, if it's accelerated, about a month
So work is going on right now.
now, as we speak. Thank you
Because
for
the
mentioning
current
that,
project that was approved a year ago was $110,000. That work is still being done. So the timing of this, as I understand it, should if it's approved in January by the RTM, it should be right at the end of when that's the final stage is the
electric.
the electric.
Thank you. Can I make a motion to approve, to recommend approval of an additional appropriation for Nathaniel Witherell for the trade line of $60,000? And I'll suggest routine.
Yeah, I'll second it and say routine's fine with me.
Okay. So motion made by Leslie Moriarty, seconded by Harry Fisher for Nathaniel Witherall for $60,000 for an additional appropriation for the tray line. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
400. So that motion has passed unanimously. It's routine, so
Thank you.
happy holidays.
Thank you. You as well.
Okay, so Roland's up now. We have economic conditions, and so Roland,
Actually, not much has changed in terms of what makes up the variances year over year. You can see on the, we call our big three, that each one of those is down from where we were a year ago. And that will probably continue through the end of the year.
but Roland, there's, you know, with due respect, we had really a fabulous year last year, but these numbers are still very good compared to, you know, if you
They
look at the
were.
last 5 or 6 years, where, you know, these numbers are still looking very solid. So you're right, in terms of year over year. Last year was phenomenal, but, and there was also some things that, you know, created that, like in conveyance taxes for the Public Act 490, but these numbers are still very strong to have building permits at $2.6 million. I mean, rates are still high, which means that could impact us the other way, right, Roland? Anyway, that's good. So, and how are we doing on the operating?
On the operating, it's again, the same variances. The one that's just timing difference is the higher data supplies. This is the software that is at the police department, you know, for the body cams and things like that. They just paid the contract earlier this year than it did last year, but that's gonna go away, that variance.
And what about the Board of Education?
Well, the salaries are still higher than a year ago. Part of that is moving people in.
From the grants,
From the
ARPA
right,
grants and
some of
Title
those,
I?
and of course, the higher GWI on the salaries.
Is that just a coincidence that it matches the line below?
It's, one of the transposition by $9,000, I can't remember which one.
And Roland, the employee benefits, is that just a timing difference?
Employee benefits.
901.
No, that is primarily the reduction of the lower pension and OPEB payments year over year.
And that's going to continue, right?
Yep.
Hopefully.
We've already made those payments, so that doesn't change.
No, but I mean, next year, based on our actuary reports. Any questions? Any questions, David?
No.
Harry?
No,
David,
no.
question?
That's it.
Okay, good. Okay, so, thank you very much, Roland. I think, you know, I find this always good to have this update. Our next item under new business is the Retirement Board Charter Amendment. And this came to us at the request of our members of our, the chair and the, of the Retirement Board, and our own Pete Minarski, Finance Director, who sits on the Retirement Board. And this is a proposed charter change, which Mr. Menarski supported, and the chair of the retirement board did not. And as I remember, the vote on this was a vote of 4 in favor and 1 against, which is the chair. And this is a first read, and I see that we have our special representatives for contract negotiations with us. Michael Mason, do you have any comments on this that you would like to make to the Budget Committee?
Nothing more than what I said.
No, would you mind just coming up to the microphone so that it gets, otherwise it's not good. You can sit down, yeah. Michael Mason.
There we go. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Long day in town hall, huh? This is a project that was kind of handed off to me by Ben back in the day when we were starting this conversation. I would say that the conversation really goes back well over a decade. And as you know, the town charter has a restriction in it for employees retiring, taking their retirement benefits, and then joining the system again, quote, double dipping. When the town charter was written, the only thing the town really offered was a pension plan, defined benefit plan. Now, fast forward years later, we're out of the pension plan. We have a different retirement system, and therefore, the language is sort of moot as far as this goes. So we've had requests through time. We've had several different programs that have come along that we've done some modifications to. A good example was the RTM approved a modification to allow police and fire to become civilian dispatchers, take their benefits, and then convert over. That was a successful program. The last of those employees had just retired about 3 months ago. And the Board of Ed has a current application in. We've had a couple employees who were disabled, who couldn't do the full-time job, but they could do something else, but they weren't allowed to do that. So this has been an ongoing conversation. It's been through the law department, and the retirement board took it up because it's really, it's their recommendation to you and then for you to approve. It's got some sound benefits to it as far as for the town, and we're hoping that you'll pass it on and we'll start a new venture. It's not really a new concept. The biggest challenge is we have lots of people who work for the town post-retirement who are taking benefit. We have police specials. You can come back to work for the town. If you're in a regular department, I think it's 15 hours a week. If it's a 24-hour-a-day department, you can go back for 24. This is very specific. What the idea here is an employee must retire, say, I'm done, I'm retiring from my job, start their retirement, and then they can apply for a different job in the town. So I think the retirement board, the chair had his concern was you might get a mass exodus for this, and therefore you would change the actuarial computation for the retirement fund, causing more short-term funding now for the long haul to pay out the benefits. But the example we have right now, there's without going into too much detail, there's a Board of Ed employee that's part-time right now who would like to be full-time. He's doing a job that he was doing when he was in another department, happens to be police, and you can imagine this is a sensitive subject, and he wanted to go full-time, and he ran into this charter. So that's what really flamed this up right now.
So does it, comments, Leslie?
Yeah, no, I still have the same concerns that we had 4 or 5 years ago with the potential abuses to this. I'm surprised that these MOUs were talked about with, and they're in writing already with several of our unions stipulating parameters around this, and yet it hasn't even gone through the charter process. But, and I'm surprised at some of the things in there. But regardless, it's going to take management to police it, right? So we don't get the abuses, right? And that's always so that's relying on people's memories of what was intended at the time. And so I think policy changes should be based on what's good for the organization. It certainly favors more problems we have with, for example, dispatch, the emergency dispatch. And that source of people have come from the police department, sometimes the fire department. It does seem to favor the people in the emergency services, that it addresses their concerns. They can retire earlier than other employees. But I still worry about the unintended consequences, the ability to have consistent and ongoing good management of this so it doesn't get abused. I know that the number of people in the retirement system is declining. There is a whole host of people who have retired previously. I don't know if they're still in the wings. So, and while the retirement board tried to quantify it, I think there were some questions about those assumptions, that they were very extreme cases potentially, that of how many people would go. But I think we have to look at those a little bit more to understand where is it at a different level of usage. And, sympathetic to individual cases, but I think when we're talking about policy changes and charter changes, we have to think beyond a current situation to make sure it applies to all future ones.
So, I was going to say, just to respond to Leslie, I didn't know whether, you're going to be able to do this, Mike, or whether we need to have Leslie put together a couple of these questions and go back to Mike Wasek. So maybe you can just include that in your follow-up.
I think Peter Menarski is still your contact on this. I just kind of, I didn't see him here, so I figured I would come down. I would say questions are definitely, as I said this morning, we definitely look forward to those. I think Ms. Moriarty's right on point. This is certainly a management issue. One of the things, when I kind of inherited this, we looked at some of the things going on in some of our peer communities with public safety in the schools, where they're creating a different division and they're looking for ways to have a different operational for school security. Kind of interesting stuff. I mean, it's all in its infancy stage as school security is sort of evolving. But I definitely think that the number one thing is it's got to be very clear in the agreement what you have to retire. It gives you no benefit for another job. You have to apply for that other job. And, and I do think that the managers are going to have to be, really scrutinizing on what they're doing. It says you cannot come back to the same job. And I think the conversation, which I saw everybody kind of light up this morning, was, well, we could change the job. But, well, okay. But you realize, of course, we have this going on a pretty routine basis. There's a lot of people who retire and are still come back working for the town. We have the police doing special work. There's quite a bit of this, so.
But they're not all entitled to benefits for that new function.
Right, correct. In the one case in the Board of Ed that we were asked this morning, I said the person's going to get health care when they retire. They're going to get health care. The new person coming in is going to get health care. That's 2 health cares. If this takes over, the town benefits by saving a health care package. That was just math.
Harry?
I think you need to, think about the demographics of people that retire in the town. And the demographics of most retirees, other than police and fire, are true retirements. They're not looking to retire and come back to a different job. They're fully retired. This has really got more application in police and fire, where the retirement age can be a lot sooner than other departments' usual pattern of behavior. And I think the real benefit to this is going to be dispatch and the prospect, as Michael was talking about, of, thinking about a different way to do school security that would avoid the tremendous overtime. So I think there are some distinct benefits that are in this plan.
Well, I certainly agree that police and fire retire younger, so there's probably more risk in those particular groups. But in today's environment, there's, things are different. And so, I don't know whether I totally agree with the point, but definitely the highest risk is with the police and fire, just because they get to retire substantially younger than, and have their benefits available to them than the other employees. Also, they were sort of the last, exiters off of the defined benefit plans too. So I think that also, you have.
Last.
I'm sorry?
Fire department was the last.
Well, I said police and fire, but fire department was the last. So, you have the earlier employees. It does give them flexibility. And so what happens to them, Mike? Do they, if they're on the defined contribution plan, do they go back on the same defined contribution plan as they were on before? Or have we even thought about that?
No, we've thought about that. As I would say, I think we need to list the questions. This needed to go before you. Again, at the retirement board level, it was was Peter and
Right.
and that, or initially Ben Branyan. So I just paid attention. I'm stepping in now. I think those are all just submittal list. I could be the center of the questions, or Peter, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so I think that's a good idea. So if people on this board have questions, just send them directly to Pete, but please copy the other members so that questions aren't duplicated. And I guess, I'll say the same thing to those who are also attending the meeting. If they want to submit, if they read this and have questions, submit them to Pete. And he can, or Pete and Mike, or Pete can share with Mike. And then, we'll decide, or he'll decide how to respond. But if everyone submits the questions, let's this others in the group know, at least questions won't be duplicated. We don't want to inundate them with questions. So thank you, Mike. And this is a first read, so not asking for any action on this. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching the TV to know when to come. So our next item on the agenda, no, our next item on the agenda is just, is an information only. We have in the packet the GEMS second quarter information, and it's strictly information. We don't have release of conditions, second half conditions for GEMS any longer, but just to make sure that everyone sees that, actually their excellent performance. I was just amazed when I read these. And then we also added another agenda item to our agenda, and that finally is, for the very first time, Kate Bush is coming before the Budget Committee, and she's here to present. And this is where we're a bit flawed with this agenda. We had a lot added. We asked for everyone to submit by last Wednesday, but that didn't work out. And the law department said nothing was coming, Barbara, but in the end, something did. So what we have before us is the Green Skies Agreement. And this is the, it says it's a net metering agreement. I don't know if that's exactly the right words, but anyway, with, for the solar panels for the roof of the Cohen Old Greenwich Civic Center. So one of the questions here, since our time was a little short to really look at this totally and to analyze it, was to ask, well, number one, do you want to have us put on the consultant? Because that was one of the things, and we can call him. We couldn't find the big phone. Oh, it is there. Oh, it was hidden away, Harry. So we can, conference him on. And then, but we do have one general question for you. Since we got it so late, is it possible that this be a first read and this could be approved at our January meeting? Which I will tell you the date in a minute.
I think I'd like the consultant to weigh in, because my understanding was that the pricing was going to expire.
The what was going to expire?
The pricing.
Oh.
We have a guaranteed price on the electricity.
So our meeting is January 14th. I don't know. So, so Harry, do you want to, yes, we have.
You got the number? Hi, it's Harry Fisher. It's from the town of Greenwich. We're calling you probably a lot later than you expected, but you've
No,
got
we actually estimated something like this. It's not, it's actually about target.
Is it on target?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, is it? Oh, so anyway, I apologize. So, yes.
I really apologize. Thanks for you to call me in 5 minutes. Actually, I just dropped my son at swim lesson. I'm going to hop back in the car so I can participate on the call.
Yep, we'd be happy to call you back in 5 minutes.
Okay, great. 5 minutes.
Okay, so 4:07, I guess that's 4:12.
Can I ask, because we just got this memo 5:30 last night. You clearly saw we had a very long agenda, so I have to admit that I read this very quickly. I know that this issue has been bouncing around for several years now. It affects Eastern Greenwich Civic Center, affects Central Middle School. We're trying to get both New Leb and Glenville sort of hooked in as potential getting those solar systems up. And I know that you may not have the full background here, but where are we? What are you expecting us, and what do you want from us? This is the Budget Committee, I think. I don't know who else is looking at this.
So I'd like to just say, a couple other things too, to add to Leslie's, comments here. I was talking with Pete this morning too. The last that we knew about this or talked about this, we were going to basically, buy this upfront. That we had determined that lease agreements had some issues in terms of the long-term viability of the vendors, whatever we call them, and that it would be better that we didn't want to take that risk and that we would prefer to, to buy it up front. And that was the last decision, and that's the decision that was also made for Central Middle School, et cetera. So, I think in terms of, and we don't mean to put you on the spot, but, just, if you can just speak to what Leslie said and then, kind of also tell us, because the economics here are going to be important, and, there is a change in administration, and that probably will impact tax credits and so forth in the future. I mean, not immediately, but with the passage of time. Also, just, one of the things, most of these products of the panels themselves come from China, so that also, let's just throw that in, will probably be more likely to have tariffs and, other issues. And the other thing is that there are so many different types of panels, they aren't as interchangeable yet as perhaps some regulatory control, I did not say that, would have over the design of the panels, et cetera. So there are some things here that perhaps even with a change of administration might change how we do things. But originally, it was my understanding that the town was going to buy, not lease. And I don't know, Leslie, because that fit with kind of your questions, and so we have a lot of questions here. And I'm looking at the clock, we got 2 more minutes
I
before.
can answer a couple of them. My understanding when I arrived was that, yes, they were talking about buying but not leasing. It wasn't, the issue was around the indemnity clauses and being able to resolve that with the lease agreement as opposed to purchasing. The Risk Management Department was able to resolve that issue, and the lease arrangement is preferable because we don't want to own them. We don't want to be 20 years down the road with outdated technology that we are then responsible for removing. We're not here for an appropriation. I think we're here for, I guess, a blessing is kind of what it really is. What we are agreeing to is to buy the energy from this vendor at a reduced rate because they will benefit from the solar that we generate. So we don't need an appropriation. The appropriation already exists to purchase energy.
But in effect, we're paying for the solar panels through our lease arrangement or
Yes.
whatever we call it. Yeah.
Yes.
And so there is an economic issue
Yes.
to this too.
But an appropriation is not needed.
Right, no. But we are committing for 20 years
Yes.
to a program.
Yes.
Leslie, you had questions here, and then I added them.
Well, it's more, the questions are probably because I don't know what's included in this legal agreement, right? So this is going to be a lease, and there's no cover page with key terms. So this is a lease agreement with a vendor. That vendor will be installing solar panels on our buildings. They have the responsibility for maintenance. There's some indemnity in there that they're signing not to damage our buildings. They get access when they need to get access, but there's a term here, which I didn't even pick up. There's going to be a pricing sheet, which gets negotiated, I suppose. And then there's the implied sort of return of capital that they're getting versus, and we're getting a lower electrical cost, but none of that data is really included in here for us to understand the transaction. Is that a fair statement? So.
I don't know what you were given.
We're given the contract.
Why don't we take a pause? I'm going to see if I can get.
Okay.
Yeah, I think 4:12, he said 5 minutes, so we hold him to his. We were given an email with information from Abby, which is basically the agreement. It's got, the 20 years there, and everything is like TBD or 000s. There's no terms. So there's really, Leslie's right, there's no economics to it. I think that we need to better understand the economics of the transaction. So I do agree with Leslie that, I find it, I did have a couple comments in the law committee, but I don't know, I think Abby incorporated them, but they were really more generic. But when you get down to what was, and it was not about indemnification, it was about the risks and the costs of the project
We're in the midst of
being,
discussing it.
buy versus lease. And I believe that, a lot of work had been put in and a lot of analysis, and I don't know who was involved, but I'm going to say at least Pete Minarski and Dan Ozesmere. And Matt, were you involved? No. So anyway, maybe we can ask our consultant if there's a term sheet. Is that a good start, Leslie? You want to ask him? So we're 4 members here on the committee, just so you know. Leslie Tarkington, the chair, and we have Harry Fisher, who's also chair of the BET, Leslie Moriarty, and David Weisbrod. We also have 2 other members of the BET in the room, Karen Fasciolotis and Matt Deschamps. We have our town budget director, Roland Geiger, our town deputy controller, Joan Lynch, and of course we have our town administrator, Kate Bush. So, and Samantha Longo. So we have some questions about this and also your time frame. So Leslie, you're the one who started out with the term sheet, et cetera.
So you know who's in the room. Our committee's just been given a copy of the contract for the town to engage with Green Skies, right? It's Green Skies. But we don't know much about the terms, nor the economics of the transaction are not included yet. I guess there are details still to be determined. Can you give us kind of the status and maybe a little background that you have on this?
Yeah, sure. It's just, I'm going to do my best to try to hear everybody. It's, sometimes if you're a little bit far away from the speaker, it's a little garbled, but let me see what I can do here. So, and there is a financial model and all that which accompanies the project. So I can make sure that everybody gets a copy of that.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Would you please send that to Roland Geiger? So Roland.Geiger, Geiger. What? Oh, oops. Geiger at greenwichct.gov. What? .org.
Yeah, I will be able to send it. I'm mobile at the moment, and I apologize. I was told to be available at from 12:30 to a certain point, and I at 4 o'clock I had to take my son to swim lessons today, so I'm a little bit kind of hamstrung in what I can send, but I can at least speak to everything now and make sure that you guys.
That's okay.
That's okay. That's fine. Just follow up. That's great.
If we could ask him about the pricing, what our deadline is, because that might resolve it if we have another month, with these prices.
That's true. So what is the time frame for needing the town to act, whoever the town is?
Yeah. Okay. So, at this point, we basically, we've taken every step that we would need, administratively with EverSource, I'm with Titan. We run the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities Renewable Energy Purchasing Program, and we took the project out to bid. Might have been going on almost maybe 8 to 10 months ago. We selected a vendor from that process. Green Skies is that vendor. For a good amount of time, we were going back and forth, with the actual contract itself, which it sounds like if you guys are in possession of the power purchase agreement, that is the main contract between the town and Green Skies. And it's been through a pretty thorough legal review. I'm not here to say that it's in its final form, but the basic premise of the agreement is you'd have Green Skies as the owner-operator of the system, so they fund the construction, they take on the responsibility of ongoing maintenance. Really every aspect of the cost of the system is their responsibility. Town of Greenwich, in its turn, buys energy from the system at a fixed price over a period of 20 years. So, the cost reduction on that, when we last ran the financial model, was about $23,000 in savings per year. So again, that's without any out-of-pocket expense on Greenwich's part. You're simply just buying the power from the array. In terms of timelines and things like that, I mean, for Green Skies at this point, short of getting permits and stuff like that from the town, like electrical permits, building permits, they are just looking for the executed PPA to come back to them. Securing the incentive, just a little bit of backstory here. So securing the incentive for small solar projects in Connecticut has actually become quite a process. One in which it's basically, you throw your hat into a ring and you basically hope, out of a limited pool of funding that your project gets selected. And, I've had clients over the last couple of years where we've had to apply, 2-3 times in order to get an award. But luckily, with Greenwich, we got the award on our first try. So that's really like the main administrative obstacle on our end has already been cleared. It really just kind of comes down to the contracting. And I'm doing this a little bit from memory, so bear with me here, but I believe the power purchase agreement rate, so basically the rate that you're paying Green Skies for each kilowatt hour of solar electricity is about 7 cents, and that compares to your addressable Eversource cost, which is about 16.5 or 17. So, you're cutting your cost per kilowatt hour down by about half, at least for what solar can pick up. And again, working from memory here, I believe this is about a third of the energy consumption that's projected for the facility would be picked up by solar. So, really this is, it's a sustainability move. It's a cost reduction and cost stabilization move. And one that's, set up to be, kind of hands off for the town in terms of like maintenance responsibilities and things like that.
So one of the questions that I think I had, a while back that I think I asked someone, I think it may even have been you, if we have audited financial statements for Green Skies. I think they've been around 6 or 7 years, am I right? There was one company that was 6 years and one company 14 years, one was acquired, the other. Is Green Skies the umbrella company or are they the sub?
Yeah, so if the town wanted to see, audited financial statements and things from Green Skies, I'm sure that they would make those accessible. They have been around as an operating company for 15 years. I mean, they're basically one of the original municipal solar installers in the state. They are a national company. They've done, I've worked with them, I don't know, whatever running tally I'm at now, 60 or 70 projects I've done, run RFPs for. Just thinking they're probably at about, 25 or 30 of those projects for municipalities. I mean, it's a particular market that they go after aggressively. And, I know that one of their primary investors is like Allstate Insurance, and they have another fund. Trying to remember the acronym, but they are like an infrastructure fund that is also a key investor in Green Skies. So, as far as like financial strength and, their ability to be around over a period of, 20 years, I for one feel confident that that'll be the case for the town, but, for sure I can ask and see, what they would share. And I mean, they're a privately held company, but I'm sure that they would share, key metrics with the town just to make sure that you felt that they were, financially sound and, not a risk of 20 years.
That would be great, Adam. I'm sorry, I should have said your name. You're Adam Teff, and I don't remember whether you said that at the beginning, but just to make sure that everyone here knows. Our question really started out with the date, and because this is, we didn't get much time to, really next to no time when we had asked for packages last Wednesday, and we just sort of, this was crashed on us. But our next meeting is on Tuesday, January 14th. And the BET meeting thereafter is on what date, maybe around the 21st or something like that? 20th or something like that. So, 21st maybe. So the question is, can we, since this is really, we do want to understand the power purchase contract and, the financial model and so forth. Is that possible to, have the time frame to, work with Kate and you and all to get our questions out there and to get some of this information back in? Is that a reasonable time frame?
Yeah, I mean, look, as far as timing goes, it's just a question of, when you guys want the project built. I always recommend that, we kind of shoot for the end of winter, springtime, because, you get your peak production really in the spring and summer and like early fall. So, being kind of teed up and ready to go at that time frame, I mean, it's, basically it's like that's when you want to harvest, as many of the gains from the project as you can. So, and I'm a little unsure too, kind of like different, I guess I'm at everyone's disposal here to try to make sure we get everybody what they need in terms of information and things like that. I do have a couple different meetings on the calendar now about this project. I just want to make sure I got everything kind of, organized and straight in my mind here, and everybody's what they need when they need it.
Well, we'll coordinate through Kate and Abby, but Kate Bush, who's here at our meeting, and we coordinate through Roland Geiger. So when I said to send it to Roland, because that means it gets directly to all 12 BET members and Pete Minarski and Roland himself, I certainly would also ask that you copy Kate on anything that's coming to, Roland and the BET. I mean, I didn't mean to, not include it, but just the kind of information that we would want as a financial board.
And just, this Leslie Moriarty, I don't want bureaucracy to get in the way of this, it probably already has, but because we're asked to opine on it, we need to have a little background information. But is this agreement covering just one installation, one of our buildings? So it's just each of Greenwich Civic Center, is that the intent? Okay. Because that's not even listed in what was sent to us that I saw. And there was the question, and I know Leslie just asked this, I'm going to ask it another way, but that the terms of the transaction aren't changing as of December 31st. So that time pressure to get this done is not because the terms are changed. It may be just to get this project initiated. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't recall where a December deadline would have come from. I'm not sure. Again, it's really just about when the town wants to see the project get built. There's no way it's going to be installed, for this year. There's some tax implications and things like that for Green Skies. And, as I'm sort of counseling my clients through like a changing political landscape here too. The Inflation Reduction Act had some provisions in it which basically, subsidize projects like this. And I'm trying to help guide, the folks I'm working with kind of sooner rather than later to get their project, built and kind of on the books because nobody's completely sure, where those tax credits are going to ultimately go. And they are on the books through 2030, but, legislation put them on the books, legislation can take them off too. So, I'm trying to help as many people as I can get their projects built in 25. And, we still have a good window for that. I would just recommend, having the power purchase agreement ironed out by like the end of January.
So we can, there's no reason why the town can't work on parallel paths too, but, so I hope, sort of related to that, your comment there, what about the panels themselves? Most of them, I think, are imported from China today. Is that a correct statement? And the different manufacturers have different, whatever, panels. So what will, the incoming administration's talk on tariffs and so forth, in addition to, the act that you're talking about, what is the word on the impact of tariffs and so forth? So if you can just, help us and focus on that part of the discussion too. You don't have to do it today, but just, as we kind of look at this economically, for the next 20 years. And this is something that we've wanted, we've directed, we've got the right clips on the roof of the, Cohen East and Greenwich Civic Center, et cetera. But, if you can help us on the tariff front too, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I think, for this project in particular, the content, in order to get an additional 10% investment tax credit on the project, we're actually using domestically sourced panels, so that meet that criteria. So I'm not necessarily worried as much about, this project in particular. But if other folks who are not doing that are, relying on equipment that's largely coming from overseas, and the tariffs take effect, and all of a sudden that becomes, uneconomical for them, it's probably going to put a supply crunch on what is domestically manufactured. So, a lot of it is, for a project of this size, I mean, luckily, I think the project can survive even if, if there's some unexpected activity on the tariff front. But, it's just uncertainty, and plain and simple, right? I mean, it's, the sooner people are able to lock in their project costs, the better off they are, I think, because I don't see, at least federally, I don't see the situation becoming more favorable to renewables in the future than it has been over the last 4 years. But, if you execute the PPA, Green Skies locks in their cost, you've locked in your PPA rate, then, you're insulated from all of that. So, hence just another reason why I'm like, well, trying to sign the same PPA a year from now could look different.
So thank you, and thank you for your flexibility on this. And if you can just get some information to Roland and Kate, then we can get working on it, over the holidays individually, look at it and read all this that we have already. I think that will be constructive, and then I think we should have a very constructive meeting on Tuesday, January 14th. So our meeting that day is at 1 o'clock, and, you can then suggest a time. This is a very unusual meeting that we had this phenomenally long agenda, and we did add this to the end since it wasn't on our agenda. But we'll be flexible for January 14th to make sure it accommodates your schedule on that day.
Yeah, no, that's completely fine. I mean, I'm 100% fine, keeping a window open. This particular day after 4, I just, was getting, was
Sorry
getting
about
tight.
that.
We're sorry, but,
Honestly,
those things.
It's no big deal. I just wanted to make sure I was available. I mean, I had someone from Green Sky is basically kind of waiting in the wings, but I wanted to do this myself. I think it was, better that it was me instead of them.
So I'm going to just put Kate on the spot, just to make sure. Kate, do you want anything else from us or from him at this point in time, or want to give him any additional direction or information that we should get, or anything that you think would be constructive here so we can move this along?
I was just going to say, send any questions you have to me and I'll forward them to Adam.
Okay.
Okay?
And if I could ask,
We'll
before,
forward through Roland, though, also. That's our style, just so you know that, always through Roland. Okay.
before January, before we reconvene, I don't know who's shepherding this project through, but if we can get a one-pager, just key terms, key objectives, key expectations financially, I think that will help our review and whoever else may need to approve this. I'm not sure who else.
Yeah, Kate, just to add, so this, I know it's been said, but we just got the memo, which is really the contract. It's disconnected from any of the terms, any of the options, whether lease, buy, purchase agreement. There's no we're sitting here without any background. I know you didn't intend that, but.
Well, unfortunately, the person who was going to deal with it had a conflict today, so. But we will get you what you need for the next meeting.
It's Abby Wilder. She's a lawyer.
No, it shouldn't be. I agree, Leslie.
You need to get to a mic.
The contract itself has been to the law committee at least twice, so it's been on our agenda. And we have reviewed the legal part of it, but we didn't have the financial part of it.
Did you approve the contract?
We did for the
Okay.
legal, because they made the changes that we wanted. Initially, it came to us as a buy, and the pushback was, again, environmental disposal, all the rest of it. So then they worked out the lease arrangement, which I think is much more advantageous to the town from a downstream issue, especially for disposal of used panels. And they included the indemnity, which initially they said they couldn't do. So both Steve and I reviewed it, and we've signed off on the legal aspects of it, but we did not have the completed package. So anything where it's to be determined, I would suggest that be filled in and we get a complete contract.
Okay, so Kate, thank you, and thank you very much, Adam. We will work with Kate for setting up the January 14th meeting, and also, and probably it'll be Samantha also working on that, and also we'll be working make sure that Abby is aware of that's the link here. And Roland, it will be our contact from the finance department. So anyway, we thank you very much. We're sorry to have interrupted your afternoon, but we appreciate you being there. We appreciate the flexibility and that we can continue and don't have to scramble before the holiday. This is our last meeting of the year, so it's much better to, we just didn't have this information, so we're in good shape. Okay, so thank you so much, Adam.
Yep, thanks, everybody. Okay, thanks.
So we're almost to the end here. My report was really only to cover a couple of things that we've talked about already. The fact that we're going to cover Public Works North Street in January because they weren't ready. Same thing with, we also have the condition on Nathaniel Witherall, which was December 31 too, also. And obviously with their, a very busy Joan in finance, and their new financial director coming on January 20th, I think we've just decided that it would be unproductive to move ahead on that at this point in time. So that was really my report. I bypassed the minutes. I think Leslie said you wouldn't be ready. And so the question here is, do we want to clean these up before the calendar year is over? And if so, is there sufficient time? At least one of them have already been signed off. to do this and just have a 5-minute meeting on Thursday at a time that's convenient, just before the regular BET meeting, whatever time works out for all 4 people? Just to meet, to approve minutes?
So again, given the very short duration and everything going on, I don't know if I can turn them around in 24 hours.
So
Maybe, but I mean, we can keep it open and figure out amongst ourselves, but we do have to post it more 24 hours before we would meet.
Right, so why don't you take a look, everyone take a look. It's really, I think they're probably pretty simple, but whatever the time is, otherwise we'll do it in January. There's no, they're out there. So, just look and see what schedules are over the next, not quite 24 hours, because 24 hours wouldn't do the trick,
We adjourn?
if it's a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor, aye.
Okay, so
We're adjourned.
we had Leslie move it. We'll let David second it this time. And
Thank
it's
you,
at
Roland.
4:38. Unanimous. 400. 438.